Well, breaking news is in. There's a huge court case right now. In fact, a few prosecutors were called in, myself and Apologia. And what we have is an apologist, Eric Manning, joining us today. He's going to be representing himself, actually representing Jesus. And we're going to be in a court of law. So we're putting Christian apologist Eric Manning on trial. Let's hope his dog did not step on a bee, if you know what I mean. Welcome everybody to the chat. I really appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for the super chats already. Let's have some fun. We're going to put Christian apologetics on trial and have a conversation about maybe, just maybe, we have something in common. But our differences, and allow you and the audience and stuff to steer the conversation via super chats if you so please. But I have Apologia and Eric with us now. Let me pop them up. Welcome to MythVision, my friends.
Hey,
thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Now, serious question. Has your dog stepped on a bee, Eric?
I don't like dogs. Sorry. I'm just not a dog person. So I am a cat.
Losing.
I am a cat guy. So I think that might score me some points with Shannon Q. But yeah, I'm just more of a cat person than a dog person. I don't like picking up crap in the yard and barking.
Oh, you just prefer that they crap in your house. That makes sense.
Just like picking it out of a sandbox. Yeah, that's loads of fun.
Well, I appreciate you joining me. Let me give a quick shout out to the YouTube channels here. Apologia's got the big bad boy where he does all his really high quality edits. You can subscribe to him there. He also has a Patreon, as well as his live channel where you can hang out with him. He anthropomorphizes his cartoon here, so you get the real Paul. And you can go check him out, subscribe to his live channel. I'm actually kind of shocked you haven't blown up. Some of the videos you've had have had so many views, Paul. I would have thought that the subscribers would have also.
Yeah, you know how it goes. Christians like to subscribe to things and atheists don't.
I get it. Testify over here. Eric Manning has a YouTube channel where he is kind of combating some of the ideas, not only in his Christian community, like the minimalist approach of resurrection apologetics and stuff, but he also combats us here at MythVision or Apologia or other skeptical channels. And so we have him hanging out with us. He may have a friend who might join us at some point during the stream.
Let me clarify. He has friends.
A handful. Some.
He has friends.
For a while.
They may not all join.
Well, I appreciate you guys joining me today. And Eric, last minute, letting us know you could. I sent an invite to Michael Jones. He is currently on his way to debating whether or not children should be married to old men. And that's pretty crazy. So I think everyone here salutes him, including Paul and me, on commending him for taking on horrible ideas like that. So everybody here is on the same page. We found something in common, right?
I mean, if we can't get on the same page about that, then yeah,
what are we doing?
That's a problem.
Exactly. Paul, look, when I sent you the invite, said, dude, come hang out with me tomorrow. Let's do a live. What did you have in mind? Did you have anything like you wanted to get off your chest before we begin?
Well, no. What I had in mind was when Derek calls, then you just say yes. That's what that's how that goes. and I was hoping, I was just getting invited to a party. It turns out, he wanted someone to co-plan this mess. So that's all fine. No, I was thinking about the state of apologetics these days, because that's what you kind of mentioned. And one of the things that I'm finding interesting, because of course the lens that I have is limited. I have the Christians in my life whom I love. There's Christians in my life who are less generous, but that's purely anecdotal, right? But I do gauge what arguments are out there and what's happening based on some of that feedback, because it's really all the live feedback I get. But then there's also paying attention to what's happening online. And an interesting thing that I'm seeing, and I might be limited in my perspective, but I do a lot of looking, is that some of the middle ground of where I think some apologetics happened during COVID times, where everyone was putting their sermons online and every Bible study was online, and you could just go free everywhere. You could just absorb information this way all you want. I'm now noticing that things have shifted to short form video. Like Frank Turek, for example, is blowing up short term. Mike Winger, Azos and Genesis, weirdly, like it's just a lot of places are going to the short form, which is a whole different type of conversation, as you guys know, and then also then to this paid online behind a wall, maybe YouTube's going to cancel us model. And it's not just, you, Derek, with MVP and Bart Ehrman's courses, but like Frank Turek and Jay Warner Wallace and a lot of the, I'm noticing the Christian academics too, they're going to these paid online courses. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of abdicating the high end stuff is going behind some paywalls or behind at least some community walls. And the shorter form stuff is now what's really feeding. And of course, Michael Jones, speaking of him, just kills it on the TikTok stuff. Like he's amazing at that short form stuff. But I think I'm even feeling a little bit sad that the conversation is leaving some of these longer forms. It takes more than 60 seconds sometimes to formulate an idea. And if you're, no one's sexy dancing to your apologetic or whatever. So it's tough to get attention. That's just something that I've noticed in the last 3 or 4 months. And I don't know if you guys feel the same, but in a way it's creating this vacuum where I'm not sure where the middle audience is going to go. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think I kind of agree with you. I mean, as I'm listening to what you're saying, Paul, I would like to see more of the conversation not happen behind paywalls, but I understand why people do it. Derek, in his case, he's got academics who are basically doing courses, and I think that's beneficial. I think there's a benefit when you pay for something that you're probably going to put more value and time to pay attention to it. So I totally get that. On the other hand, I would like to see it stay more in the public sphere. It seems like a lot of apologetics and counter apologetics is kind of turned into more of just answering kind of like bad objections on TikTok. Like I like Michael Jones's, like his are amazing because they're hysterical. And it's sad that some of the things that he has to answer are things that he has to answer. And I do them too. It's not like, so I'm not saying he's wrong for doing them, but I would like to see less just going after low hanging fruit, I guess. And more engaging. That's what I like about you two guys, is because you do deal more with the historical stuff, the text. Derek has all kinds of scholars on. Paul, you invite all kinds of scholars on.
Paul does too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He does too. He's got Allison, he's got Ehrman,
I was going to say, just to
Davis.
tease about what you're saying here, Eric, on the whole course thing, 2 things, and they're coupled together. And that is, these scholars that we interview, they are humans who literally made their career in this vein. So the way we get them, time is money for anyone. The way we get an academic who literally spends their life to make an income, either publishing, writing articles, going and giving lectures at universities, teaching classes and courses in real life at universities, to want to come to the internet world and give us public information that's really in these institutions, unless you want to go buy a academic published book they may have put out, which is like $80, $90 sometimes, 60, 50, 60 bucks. I try to get them to kind of take their work, package it into a course curriculum where you and anyone can own it for life, purchase that course, take the course as many times as they want, have friends over, whatever, talk about it, argue about it, whatever, and give the opportunity for other YouTubers to be affiliates to help get those academics to come and give free time, which helps promote their books, promote their course, and allows them to make a living. And so it's like a win-win-win for everybody, including the public sphere, but some of it needs to be behind a paywall in order for that scholar to be able to want to put all the time and energy they are going to the public sphere.
And I don't knock that at all. I wasn't intending to knock it. And I think Eric made a great point. When you pay $1 for something, you actually pay attention to it. If you put all those videos up for free, they get lost. I totally understand that. But I also see just this vacation of I think maybe there's fear of platforms and how that's going to work, but I'm seeing like the Answers in Genesis. They have a subscription TV now, and Kirk Cameron and all that kind of stuff. That's all paid now, and Ray Comfort's going that way, and J. Warner Wallace and Frank Turek have created their whole behind the wall so that there aren't so that you don't have to deal with those sketchy atheists when you're watching our stuff. Like it was not a judgment call, it was an observation.
Sure.
I get it.
To say something to that, I mean, first of all, I don't understand kind of the cancelophobia. I don't think that talking about arguments for the existence of God or arguing for the historical reliability of the Gospels or the resurrection or something is going to get you canceled. I mean, I do understand maybe some of the concern because I know David Wood had to fight with all the, keyboard jihadis trying to get his videos canceled. And so I could kind of understand some of that because there's just some ridiculous things that go on. I mean, I even published a video criticizing a Muslim, and all of a sudden, like a video that they made, and I felt as almost like my whole channel went down after that for several months. And I thought, am I being like shadow banned or something? Like I'm not trying to get all paranoid or something, but so I kind of understand some of it, but I don't want there to be a retreat. I don't think that there's any reason to think that YouTube's going to take your videos down because you're promoting Christianity. I mean, if the Daily Wire can say some of the things that they're saying on a daily basis, like, and YouTube is making tons of money off them, and they're not censoring what they're saying, then I don't understand why Christians feel like, oh gosh, we got to go underground with our material. To me, it's just, gosh, I got to be careful.
Well,
I don't want to get myself in trouble, but it seems
but
like
I also want to take a little bit off of you. I feel like there is. I was giving examples on the apologetic side, but I feel like there's other examples on general left wing type stuff, which is not specifically atheist stuff, but it's a nice talking point to drive people to other places. I feel like it's used across the board, maybe inappropriately, that it's kind of like this threat of canceling, that we're so edgy that we're not going to be allowed to speak anymore. It's a marketing ploy as much as anything, I think, sometimes. But not to single out Christians that they're the only ones, because I see it other places as well.
Hey, just giving a shout out to the supers here. Lost fan Derek, please passionately answer the following question and get Paul's opinion too, please. Are we or are we not MythVision? Of course we are. Paul, what is your slogan, man? You know, I have a little we are MythVision. What is yours?
Well, I just open with where a former Christian takes a look at the claims of Christians. And that alone gets people angry enough that I don't need to really say much more.
I know I'm triggered.
No such thing as a former Christian, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hey, I've had people tell me there's no such thing as a former atheist, and I'm like,
yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, it's weird.
Same argument.
Imnag says, we don't need Derek to answer that because we are MythVision. Warm.
Ugh.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And then David Aaron Hill in the house. David, thank you for that super. I'm just trying to make sure I didn't leave anybody hanging here. We're getting already in here with this one. Can testify, demonstrate Jesus really said John 13:35.
Oh, this guy started like a big long chain of my comments the other day. I mean, demonstrate what? Like mathematically? Like the laws of physics or something? Like, no, I can't do that. But historically speaking, I think there's a lot of good reasons to think that, now this is an unpopular thing to say, that John is reporting the truth, that he's trying to report facts, that he's an accurate, reliable reporter, and that his gospel can be trusted. And if you want resources on that, I would check out Craig Blomberg's book, The Historical Reliability of the Gospel of John, and Lydia McGrew's book, The Eye of the Beholder. Also check out any commentary on the Gospel of John from D.A. Carson or Leon Morris, if you want to know more about that argument.
What about John 11:35?
Jesus wept. Yeah. Everybody knows that's the shortest verse in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Somebody in the comments is going to correct me, like, no, it's actually not.
No, that's the one I meant.
Yeah.
Thank you for that super chat. I appreciate it. Yeah, so like what I think we'll end up seeing in our discussions really is this is the scholars that I particularly favor, and here's the reasons why I think their confidence level on this, or I'm confident in what they've said in their work on eyewitness testimony in John or whatever. Before we get into Gospels, I kind of wanted to deal with this minimalist approach, and first want to introduce Than here. Than, welcome to the channel, man. I know you're suffering from an injury and stuff, but you're muted. I can't hear you, at least.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
there you go.
There we go.
I
Sorry.
hear
Should
you.
I display names? I mean,
Yeah.
You don't have to unless you want to. I don't care.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how long I last.
There, do I fit better now?
there you go. I got to make him go above his name at least. So his face. Welcome
Sorry.
in here, Paul.
Oh, you're fine, Dan. Just be comfortable, man.
Okay.
Paul, your co-host today, man. So if I have to leave and you just take care of everything, you're not gonna have a problem with that, right?
Well, speaking of dogs, at some point my dog is going to go bananas. So this is the witching hour. So maybe we'll both abdicate, and the Christians can take over your channel. How about that?
Oh,
Dude.
yeah. Well, we're here to proselytize to the entire audience. I'm just kidding. Paul, the minimalist approach, the minimal historical facts arguments for Jesus. Let's dive into that. Let's talk about what the case they're making. It sounds to me, and then you feel free to jump on, and then we'll allow back and forth with us and the Christians on this in the studio. And that is, it sounds like they are making a lot out of Paul and are not as dependent on Gospels as they are on Paul. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, my thoughts is that, so when you are working from an academic standpoint, and that is your vantage point, I think it makes sense when you are hearing that there is broad consensus among secular scholars and a lot of scholars that Paul wrote 7 of those books, but the rest of it we're not taking too seriously. If you want to make headway, just like you and I, Derek, sometimes we will grant things for the sake of discussion because we want to, move the conversation forward. So you and I, for example, we grant in most of our discussions that Jesus was there was a human person upon which the stories about Jesus were based, because that's just a pragmatic thing to do in terms of, having discussions with those we want to talk to. I feel like granting the letters of Paul is probably something that, like, the Gary Habermas's and the Mike Laconas of the world, in their academic circles, that bodes well, or they can make some headway and people are willing to listen to the next thing that's on their lips, as opposed to coming in hot and saying, hey, the Gospels are eyewitness testimony, which they would kind of reject outright. So from that standpoint, it makes sense that that's an argument that you want to make. And it also is, I think, has rhetorical power. It's an elevator pitch situation when you can say, even the most secular scholars, Bart Ehrman and anyone you want to truck out, agrees to these kind of things. How can you, Mr. Person in the elevator, disagree with all these other scholars? And so when you can build a case that way, it has that rhetorical quick hit. I mentioned it before. We're getting like more and more in this TikTok land where if you're not making your point in that first 60 seconds, 2 minutes, you kind of get lost. So I think that is the strength of the argument, because typically those people aren't thinking about it deeply anyway. So it puts a pebble in their shoe. You'll go home and say, oh man, maybe I'm cutting against the grain of even secular scholarship. Now, if you go and you research it out, that's where it's a problem. That's where you, as Eric once said, you create a monster like me.
That's right.
Where it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, wait, but that doesn't hold up because you told me some half-truths in there. And as soon as you start telling half-truths, then you start disregarding all the rest of it. So anyway, I feel like it comes from a genuine spot of wanting to have these conversations. It's just not structurally sound as for those who want to think deeply about it. And I guess that's my perspective. at this
Eric,
point.
if I may, just
Sure.
to give my 2 cents on what I think's happening with those who are making minimal facts arguments. I definitely think Paulogia is right. Or Paul is right in that this is it's more, they're trying to take a sophisticated approach to kind of bridge to the skeptic. Like, hey, we're willing to give up some ground to show you, like, hey, we're not just hook, line, and sinker trying to accept everything and make a case that everything is so solid and clear in the cases. They're willing to say, okay, there's discrepancies. There may not be literal history in some of these places in the Gospels. We're not going to put too much confidence in some of this. But Paul will put a lot of confidence on this guy named Paul. I mean, for crying out loud, why would Paul convert? There's no reason other than he really saw the risen Jesus, and therefore there's no other explanation than him actually converting to, or the word convert is a big no-no to Paula Fredrickson and some of the other New Testament scholars, because it's not like a completely different religion, but that's a whole different can of worms I don't want to go down. So I feel like what I want to give the benefit of the doubt to those who are the minimal facts argument people is that I think they're trying their best to be honest with gospel discrepancies, considering they're not on the same page. Each gospel has differences, and if we want to get into those differences, we can, pericope by pericope, and highlighting those differences synoptically and whatnot, or even John in comparison and stuff. But I have to say, pat on the back for that, though it gives up ground. That's where I think the maximalists come in. And so, Eric, feel free to give us your jab, and then why are you a maximalist?
Well, I mean, yeah, if you are a skeptic and you're talking to that person on the elevator, I mean, you could just stop them in the tracks and say, well, what were the appearances like? Like, how do we know that it really was a resurrection from the dead and not something else? I mean, strange things happen. People think they see the Virgin Mary or the angel Moroni or something in Joseph Smith's case. And so without being able to kind of outline in detail what the appearances were actually like, I don't think that you have a very strong case. I don't think you can rule out all naturalistic explanations, nor do I think that you necessarily need to. There are certain, like I mentioned, Marian apparitions. There's a few of those I don't really know what to do with. I don't reject them completely, but I don't necessarily think, I'm not sure that they happened either. And so it's a vague miracle report at best might make you go, that's weird. But I don't think that you can say, like Gary Habermas says, that you can rule out all the naturalistic explanations with just the fact that Jesus was crucified and that Paul converted and Peter and maybe some of the other disciples believe that they actually saw Jesus. I don't think you can do it all just through 1 Corinthians 15 and some other stuff in Paul's letters, because just epistemologically, like, we need details when it comes to an extraordinary claim, and the resurrection, we should just be willing to admit that is an extraordinary claim. And so that's
just to be fair, you're saying Paul's letters alone doesn't cut it. I mean,
well, what does Paul tell us about the resurrection? Yeah, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I cut you off, but I was just trying to make sure we emphasize on the same page. Like, even in your worldview, like, if all you came across were Paul's letters, you'd be like, I can't. That's not enough for me. Like, I need more.
So for instance, like Pine Creek will stick people in the flying man chair, so to speak, and he'll say, would you believe in Christianity just if all you had to go on was Paul's letters? I would be like, no, because there's no way of knowing that the disciples were actually rational unless we know what the appearances were like. And so you're going to have to use the details that are in the Gospels. And if you're off the bat willing to say, you know what, I'm going to grant for the sake of argument that maybe there are a mess of contradictions in the Gospels. Then what's going on with the appearances there? Like, how do we know those stories aren't just, partially true and then maybe partially made up, partially embellished? If those don't reflect the actual eyewitness testimony, then I don't think that you have a very strong claim. And so people might get mad because I'm helping the atheists make an argument here, but like it's just not a good argument. I think if you were going to go minimalist, I think the only way that you can pull it off is if you bring in other evidence, like maybe some really good, well-evidenced modern miracle claims might move the needle more. But that's that they'd have to use other arguments.
That kind of just segues into one of my other critiques about the minimal facts argument, which is most of the time when I watch minimal facts apologists make the minimal facts argument, an objection will come, and they're no longer minimalists anymore. They're bringing in extra data, and they're going beyond the scope of the minimal facts argument to justify the conclusion, which just kind of tells you that this minimal facts argument doesn't work. You need more data.
Yeah. And one thing I'm working on right now is I don't know if you guys watched the debate between Justin Bass and Bart Ehrman on the Unbelievable podcast.
That hurt me, but
I heard it went really poorly. I haven't watched it.
It was
yet.
a bloodbath. Bart Ehrman, I respect Justin Bass. I think he's a good guy, but he just wrecked him. And that's what happens when you limit your data set to just 4 people believe they saw something. Like, okay.
So Paul doesn't. So this brings up Paul. Your hypothesis is that technically 1, maybe 2, right? And you think that kind of spread. Give us your hypothesis here.
Well, so I think the data, especially the minimal facts data, is completely explained by one person. I propose Peter because that makes some good sense. Genuinely believing that Jesus rose from the dead. Social contagion takes care of the rest up until the time of Paul. And Paul also needed to have, I feel like 2 people need to have a genuine experience. Someone initially, and then Paul later having a genuine experience. If you have 2 people with genuine experiences, then I think the rest of it is covered. And I've been, I pitched that with other experts and in this field a lot. And people do generally concede that at least with the minimal facts, that does cover it. But they want to then bring in, well, doesn't it also explain group appearances? Well, you know what? Minimal facts isn't group experiences.
That's true.
Like Eric says.
No, that's a good point. Bart Ehrman doesn't concede the group appearances. Where are we getting that 90% of scholars? If it's a minimal fact, it's got to be 90% of scholars.
I was just going to ask. I don't even know what the minimal facts are anymore, to be honest with you, because it seems like...
Well, it's fast and loose depending on which show they're on to talk about it.
Yeah, that's kind of one of my other critiques. It's just like, I don't actually see a set standard of what the minimal facts are. Sometimes I see 2 facts, sometimes I see 5. And then when it comes to those people that want to say there's like closer to 5, I have a hard time actually knowing where they're actually getting some of this data from. I've heard some people say it's consensus that Jesus was buried, and I'm just like, I don't know. And I'm saying that as a Christian, which Eric and I probably get upset a lot of Christians, but
right. And they use the slush word. Apostles, right? That's when I know it's in trouble, because the slush word apostles gives you maybe the 12, maybe the church fathers, maybe like Stephen, Luigi. We're just including this big word in there when it's really like, are you still talking about eyewitnesses anymore or not?
Sure.
So
there's so many avenues to go down with this, but I think that typically while they're arguing minimal facts, I don't think that's not all their arsenal. They have much more in their saddle that they're pulling out as that argument and debate happens, but they'll want to really argue on those certain points, especially Paul, and then work backwards and go, well, I do think the Gospels are reliable, but they don't die on the hill of trying to like approach the conversation like that. So they would be like a secondary form of data that they consider evidence, but they don't make it a primary thing. You do. And I guess we'll steer now into maximal arguments and what you see the strength of that. How does that help you in your estimation that this is more reliable or true?
I mean, first of all, I think it's a little more honest. I mean, it's weird to say, hey, let me just grant for the sake of argument that the Gospels really are a mess of contradictions, but I can still prove the resurrection happened. But after you convert, like, I'm going to argue for a whole lot more than that. This book is inspired. And it just feels a little bait and switchy. Maybe you guys as skeptics would agree with that. Mm-hmm. And so I would rather just argue for what I want to argue with up front. I also feel like we're treating the Gospels like this is going to be kind of bad, but we're treating the Gospels like our ugly girlfriend. Like, we don't really want to be seen with her in public. We're embarrassed of her. but we really, anyway, I'll leave it at that. But so it's just like, but I don't think that we should be embarrassed. I think that the Gospels, there's a wealth of information, a wealth of evidences for the reliability of the Gospels in numerous different ways, internally, externally. And it gets us to those crunchy details of this was a Jesus who could be touched. This is a Jesus who had conversations with people, basically had Bible studies after his resurrection, and spent 40 days with them and stuff like that. Now I understand it's the pushback from them is like, well, that's more of an uphill battle, and you can't really do that in an elevator pitch. But if our argument is correct, that doesn't really matter. You're going to need to bring in more details anyways. And I understand, like, well, there's criticism and the scholars are against you and this, that, and the other. Well, at that point, I'm like, okay, great. Let's have that discussion. Hear why I think some of those critics are wrong. Maybe some of these are some of their bad habits that I see. And then you can, kind of take a look deeper from there if you want to, or decide what you're going to do.
You want to jump on that super chat from Blake there?
Yeah, well, I've got some back here real quick. Let's just hit this. I don't want to dwell on it much, but Holy Freak 86, thank you. I'm an evangelical from Argentina, a majority Catholic country. It amazes me that evangelicals, Protestants in the U.S., would actually feel persecuted. Thank you so much for that support. Yeah, the ones that are in power feel the most persecuted. It's kind of interesting how that works. Blake, I've heard the best proof for the resurrection is the empty tomb, but why don't we see this defense used by early apostolic fathers? Correct me if wrong. I have my personal say. This is after reading Richard C. Miller's work, which you guys know I've been like quoting a lot and I've been in conversation with. I'm going to be interviewing him here at the end of this month, traveling to California and getting a bunch of interviews. It'll be the first time anyone has ever interviewed him and brought his work public. That's another advantage of taking the courses. Like it encourages people who are these, like you come across their works and you're like, oh, look at this tome of stuff. And I have to admit, Christians have been doing this a lot longer than the skeptical community in terms of getting academics. So like that, like you can get Gary Habermas, you can get, N.T. Wright to come on a podcast. You can do that stuff. But some of these people are in ivory towers that you have to really immerse yourself in this material to even know they exist. And then I'm trying to like get them out of the dark and put them in the light. And so I'll be traveling down there. Well, ultimately his point in his book, Resurrection and Reception in Early Christianity, is to argue that the apostolic fathers and of course the New Testament literature, they're not making historiography arguments like we see modern apologists do today to argue this is historically reliable about what actually happened. He says that's absent from Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, you name it, like all these early church fathers and such are not arguing the historical reliability and trustworthiness like we hear today. I think it's a post-Enlightenment development that we need to justify the reliability and trustworthiness historically about these claims, and that's his case. But I'm going to leave it to the expert for those interviews to elaborate further. And if you're really interested in diving into his book, it's like $50. It is a academic press, Rutledge book, but he dives into this. That's his take.
Yeah, I mean, to answer that, Justin does mention that there was the assertion that the body was stolen. This is in Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 108. There's also Tertullian and Despeculus. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation. Sorry, I don't speak Latin, friends. But this was in 200. He also brings up the same thing about the accusation that the tomb was the body was stolen. So at least it is in those two fathers. Those are pretty early. Justin's writing 150. I would kind of be interested in what Richard Miller says about why does Justin call them the memoirs of the apostles? Why does he call those that? Also, again, like Michael Jones has brought up with you, like a lot of these early apologists, they're not arguing with skeptics in the sense of like, give me historical evidence. They're arguing with people who are either pagans, or they're arguing with Gnostics. They're arguing with Marcion. they're arguing with Roman emperors and saying, please stop slaughtering us. Our beliefs aren't really that weird compared to yours. And so, I mean, I'd be interested in what his response would be. I haven't read his work, so I don't want to like just assume he doesn't know what he's talking about at all. I'm not saying that, but I just that's my initial kind of like, that doesn't sound quite right to me.
Miller's work is on my read list. I just need to get some money to get. I want the physical copy of it.
Yeah.
So being poor, I need to save up money for it.
I don't blame you. I get it. Trust me.
To Blake's point, is it the best proof for the resurrection? Thing is, it's not part of the minimal facts. But that's why Gary and all those people, they always want I do 4 + 1 or 6 + 1. And the empty tomb is always the +1. Because I would agree that when you add it in, it requires a whole different field of explanations than the pure minimal facts do. And so in that sense, yes, if you are granting the empty tomb, it creates a lot more problems for naturalistic explanations than not. So in that sense, you're correct. It is a good proof because it goes to it. The trouble is, of course, there's nowhere near. That's the least attested of all the proposed facts within scholarship. But to answer the second half of the question, why I don't. So I'm granting that it is pretty good if you can make it stick. Why don't we see a defense in early apostolic fathers? I think if you take the Gospels are the way I think they are, and that is that they, but between when Mark happened and John happened, people were asking probing questions, and more details came to light that were true, if we're granting, or stories were developed in response. Clearly, there's a very, very early response needed for the empty tomb. Like there was the stories of the guards, were not in Mark, but were in Matthew, and just the whole empty tomb narrative, itself wasn't actually in Mark and this kind of stuff. So I feel like by the time the apostolic fathers came around, those objections were dealt with, I think, in the community. I don't know, Eric, would you say that that's fair? Like by the time John was written,
I mean,
probably people weren't arguing that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at like Celsus, he's not really arguing with people like, well, the tomb wasn't really empty. Come on, prove it to me, guys. And so I would disagree with you a little bit, Paul. I think the empty tomb is definitely in Mark. I understand about the guards at the tomb. Just from there, we want to be a little careful that we're not making an argument from silence. But I understand this from the skeptical.
Oh no, but even if let's say that
it looks like it's an addition, sure.
But even let's say that if 100% there were guards.
Sure.
There was a stone, all those kind of things.
Sure.
Mark didn't feel like he needed to include that true detail.
Okay. I got you.
But by the time Matthew and Luke were written, more people were asking questions like, oh, we better include these true details because it's a thing people are talking about. Is that reasonable?
I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable. No.
Yeah.
I like how you just played in the sandbox. Here's a perfect example of a skeptic playing in the sandbox. We don't grant that there were guards at the tomb in our estimation of the data, but for the sake of discussion with you, we're willing to put them there just to dialogue on this issue because we have a different expectation on the synoptic problem with Mark being first, and that they're adding details later. Whereas you would say it's an argument from silence. I would say there's no evidence that there were in Mark, and we can't argue there were unless it says that there were. So there's like a difference of opinion there. But one other thing I would say real quick is that the idea of this empty tomb and having guards there to kind of deal with maybe people are saying, hey, there wasn't, or they did steal the body, or whatever the excuse the apologetic is for Matthew inserting that. There are a lot of great scholars. Allison's one of them, of course. I always mention Allison, but others that point out in these early communities, really a lot of this literature we're seeing in the New Testament are factions of different groups of Christians combating one another. For example, in early Thomasan traditions, you see that Thomas, this Gnostic, what we like to call Gnostic group, has Jesus not in a physical body. And so you have who touched the physical body of Jesus? Thomas. So it's almost like a literary, purposeful apologetic against other versions of Christ movements that don't think Jesus has a physical body. So what do you have? You have the very guy who represents that movement almost like a nationalistic person, like Moses represents Israel, Thomas represents this group of Christians, Peter represents a group, Paul, et cetera, et cetera. I am of Cephas, I am of Paul. And you have this group of Thomas Christians who have their guy touching him, putting his finger in his side and going, okay, I believe. So
that's where go ahead.
I know you can explain that in other ways,
Sure.
but several academics
Sure.
look at this and go, yeah, these are different factions trying to make sense of the data.
I mean, my brief pushback on that, and we don't have to go too far down like different bunny trails or whatever, but I would just say that the Gospel of Thomas is probably more of a 2nd century forgery, where I would put John is in the 1st century. And so I think that's like automatically a problem. And then there's competing traditions of Thomas. Of course, you have Thomas, the one who goes into India. Mm-hmm. There are still Thomas Christians to this day. They're basically just like Eastern Orthodox, or I guess there's some Catholic versions of them as well. And so that trace their heritage all the way back to him visiting them in India. And you do have the Acts of Thomas, which is obviously very apocryphal and super flowery and over the top, but it is also a 2nd century work where he goes to India and stops a wedding, and there's all kinds of adventures. It's a wild read.
Right. Paul, I'm going to keep pressing here, brother. Gettysburg Demoniac, what are the best arguments in your opinion against Christianity or theism in general? Paul, I'll let you answer that first, Paul.
Well, so for me, the best argument against Christianity, and it's not good as a general proof, but it is a good proof for me, is divine hiddenness. Because if I am indeed a non-resistant non-believer, and if I stay that way my entire life until I pass, that means that God didn't reveal himself well enough for me to even get to the first level of intellectual ascent to even make any genuine opinions there. Now, I know, of course, Christians want to point to suppressing the truth, and that would be a resistance to non-believer. The only thing I can know for sure is my own thoughts, and I can examine my own thoughts to see if I'm resisting or not. And certainly when I was falling out of it, I wasn't resisting. So for me, divine hiddenness is the strongest because it eliminates a loving God who wants a relationship with me. That would leave open general deism or other kind of things, which you need an actual falsification criteria to get rid of any given religion in general, and often that's sticky. Like if someone wants to define a God for me, I actually would want to follow up with what's the falsification criteria. And theism in general, so that was why I went there. I think theism in general is non-falsifiable, because if you want to have a God that created everything but doesn't interact with his nature or doesn't care about us, how are we supposed to know? I don't know.
I want to turn this and ask if I can just a brief response, either Than or Eric. What would you say is the best argument against Christianity as a Christian?
Yeah, Eric, do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
No, I was thinking this would be a great one for you, since he's done like devil's advocates debates for atheism before. So.
Yeah. So I would say the best case against Christianity is going to be my argument that I made in my devil's advocate debate with Captain Dadpole. So I kind of made a spin-off of an argument from Inscrutable Evils, and I include divine hiddenness in it. And so if you want to know that argument, is it okay if I plug that video?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can go to my YouTube channel, just look at that devil's advocate debate. It's a Bayesian argument. I grant a prior probability of 9.99 to theism for it. And I just argue, given even 1,000 instances of any of these inscrutable evils or sufferings or divine hiddenness that you see in the world, there's a less than 0.001% chance that theism is true. So yeah, I think that's the strongest argument against Christianity, just because if there is no God, then Christianity is false.
Isn't your YouTube's Explore Christianity, right?
No, Exploring Reality. Explore Christianity is my friends Stephen Boyce and Jonathan Beasley.
Okay. You guys came close to each other there. Okay.
Yeah, I want to know how that happened. Who came first?
quick little plug. You want to watch that? You can go over here, and I'm sure you can discover it on his YouTube channel as well. So go subscribe. If you want to have the dialogue back and forth, I think it's important we do. Go subscribe to his YouTube channel. All right, I'm going to keep pressing forward because we could go on and on. You know how it is. Humanist Reformation says, I could see believing in the Gospels in the first century, especially after the destruction of the temple. But after the second century, they become unreliable.
Is this kind of a, like, Jesus is a failed apocalyptic prophet kind of argument, or what?
No, I think it's a textual transmission argument. I
think based on my experience with Humanist Reformation, I think this is the apocalyptic
really?
argument.
Okay.
I think, and that's only from my past dealings, and that is the idea that Jesus said some things and expectations were looking at like the temple being kind of like the peak anytime now. It's about to happen. So the idea is in the second century, they would say, hey, this isn't reliable. So I guess if you were standing to give Humanist Reformation, I want to be able to see Paul too. Well, that's why I took down the super chat. If you were standing on the Mount of Olives with Jesus as he's saying the things he's saying, and there's still a temple standing, and he says, "Hey, we're in the season, day or hour, I don't know, but we're in the season, and here's all these signs." Like I could see someone, especially an apocalyptic Jew, holding on for everything there, holding on to those words and saying this is believable. What I think Humanist is saying is by the second century, you're looking back going, those words he said, though, like we have to make them mean other things now. We have to stretch out these things. And that's, I think, what Humanist is trying to get at.
Do you want me to go first then on this one, or?
Yeah. Oh, I was muted. My bad. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I don't know. I'm going to go back to the details regarding the resurrection and everything else like that. And so that's part of what I would argue. Number two, like if you're standing back there when Jesus is saying those things, I mean, is it going to sound verbatim, like tape recorded, like what Mark said? Is it going to be in that exact order? Is Mark like narrating it in a different kind of way? There's just a lot of things going on there. I'm not like a huge Dr. Craig guy, but he does have a 3-part series where he talks about the delay of the Parousia, and he says that basically like the way that things were recorded weren't exactly like, it wasn't as if it was like a tape recorder version of what was happening there, and there's some order that got mixed up, and maybe that's some of the confusion. I'm not saying I necessarily would die on that argument. Obviously Than has had Bram Rawlings on his show. I've had Bram and Matt Harkey, which is a mutual friend of ours, Derek, duke it out and debate that issue. So people are, while we're plugging, doing free plugs, I'll plug that if people want to check out that debate, because it's
charging you for these plugs, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. So I got to add my own super chat here. So check that out, because it's a deep, very deep subject. It's not something that I can probably really give a very satisfying 2 to 5 minute answer at all.
I couldn't off the cuff either. I would have to have stuff prepared.
I know Inspiring Philosophy has done 3 videos in response to it. I know Harkey has come on your show and he's starting to respond to those things. And so it's just an ongoing conversation. And I think that conversation is going to continue. I will say this. I'll grant that so while we're kind of granting sides a little bit here, I would say this is probably the better argument that your guys' side. This probably is the strongest argument against my view, I would say, or at least one of them. And so I'm willing to like grant that this one does have some force.
Appreciate that. I feel very, very appreciated. Paul, did you want to comment on that, or?
No, all I would say is I'm less skeptical about the minds. I think they were coming up with strong arguments, or at least the community itself was coming up with their own justifications for why it wasn't happening within that first generation. Yeah. And once you kind of take that on board, I don't think anything significant changes from 2nd century to 3rd century, 4th. I feel like as soon as you were past that first generation, you're kind of just going along with this is God's plan. So I don't see that there was a huge difference there. It's tough for any of us to know what we would do if we were there, because we would be different people. So
I would agree with that.
Thank you. Demand says, would y'all ever engage with Islam? We need more men. So I get this a lot.
I think in general, those last 4 words are not true.
Right. I think
just in general.
Islam has plenty of men. No, I think that this is so this is something that comes up a lot, and a lot of people haven't seen. I have dipped my toes into critical stuff on Islam.
Mm-hmm.
I was never a Muslim. I do interview ex-Muslims. I have had several ex-Muslims come on. I've talked to academics in the Islamic scholarship, Quran scholarship, often mostly Western scholars, even a Muslim scholar themselves. The thing is I don't want to get into the dawa beef that goes on in the internet world. That like it's really toxic. If you think if you think apologetics in the Christian arena is like, this is nothing compared to what goes on over there with death threats and the whole nine. And the other reason is I don't know how much I want to do engagement with apologetics and apologists. This is fun, but like it is distracting, I'll be honest, from me being able to really dive as deep as I want to go into the materials and to like produce these highly scholarly works. So I'm trying to be balanced and engage and have these conversations, but the whole apologetic scene of diving in, it's very, very difficult. Some of the arguments I've heard from apologists in the Muslim world, or the way some of the, like I've had people phone in to call and like challenge the ex-Muslims, and some of the things that they think are like good arguments, I'm like, I'm wasting my time. Like, how do you convince someone who thinks because people memorize a book that proves everything is like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things. So
go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I was just going to say, you have guys like Apostate Prophet who already just do a really good job destroying Islam as it is, as well as David Wood. And so to me, it's like you have those two guys who are just absolute bulldozers who are pretty popular. So I personally find Christianity to be way more interesting. Even if I was a skeptic, I would probably be more interested, just because Islam makes more ridiculous claims. Maybe even when I was an atheist, I tried to look in Islam, and it was just like, okay, well, nope, I'm not interested in this at all after just a little bit of looking, because it just, I don't know. There's just I don't know how to explain it. It's just kind of a inexplicit kind of thing, but there's just a weirdness factor to it, maybe, that I don't see with other religions, maybe other theistic religions.
My greatest strength online in talking to Christians, and even just being able to dialogue with Christians, is that I can pass the shibboleth test, because I was one. Like, I know I can speak. I understand the shorthands. I speak the language. I can put myself into the place of, it was not that long ago I thought the earth was 6,000 years old. It's not that long ago. The trouble is, so therefore Christians can give me a little bit of credence that I was, at least, even if there's no such thing as a former Christian, I was at least raised among them and kind of understand them from that perspective. I feel like I don't bring anything like that at all to the discussion on Islam. I feel like they're just going to say, well, you are an outsider who doesn't understand our stuff.
Yeah. You don't speak Arabic, or you haven't read this.
So I don't feel like I value add on that discussion. So.
And this is another reason I don't do the apologetic side of it. I disagree with Eric on the, like, my interest in Islam as a religion. And I'm not saying that Eric wouldn't have some interest, just not as much as he does, obviously, in Christianity. But like, when I have done some research into it, it's actually quite a fascinating thing to like research and dive into. However, I'll make this one comment that let's keep moving. That is, several academics, Western scholars, who have critically analyzed using historical methodology, that we do the same thing with the Bible, and they do this with Quran and early Islamic studies. They have noted to me, and I'm not naming names, how much crap, I'm using the word crap, that they get in emails from those that are religious scholars in Islam. And it is very sensitive. It is not as sensitive to deal with Christianity as it is to deal with Islam. And there are reasons behind that. Some I get and I understand, especially post 9/11 and anyone who's a Muslim and the way they're treated in the West, etc. But then there are other reasons. It's like they haven't engaged with this critical stuff on their material from outsiders like Christianity has for centuries. So Christianity has been picked apart, I would say, even by Christians internally, before any skeptics like me and Paul came on the scene and started to like analyze. In fact, we read works from Christians who have kind of done a historical critical method and all that. So anyway, it's a very difficult subject to dive into. And Demand says, what should the prior probability of miracle be?
What a fun question.
Define miracle first.
Because miracle.
Because if it's literally like if the question is like, did God create, arrange the circumstances without changing anything in that natural order such that, a car didn't hit me on the street or something like that, right? Like that's just God ordering things without, and how could we even know? And I think a lot of Christians that I talk to, they count that as a miracle. So
yeah, I wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't. I would say, I think J.L. Mackie, he's a very prominent atheist philosopher, has got a great definition. He says, the laws of nature describe the way in which the world, including, of course, human beings, works when left to itself, when not interfered with. A miracle occurs when the world is not left to itself, when something distinct from the natural order as a whole intrudes into it. And so I'm actually pretty happy with that definition coming from an atheist.
Yeah.
What would the prior probability be, I guess? And I don't think this is, how do you measure this, right?
Yeah.
We aren't omniscient to be able to calculate that in a true philosophical sense, but wouldn't we all agree that the probability is far less than the way the world naturally works on its own?
I don't think, I'll take a crack at it for this. I don't think you can actually answer that question, generally speaking, because the reference class of miracle is so ambiguous that I think you need to take this on a case-by-case basis. Like, what's the prior probability of a person growing their stomach back being a miracle versus what's the prior probability of a person, like Paul said, right, not getting hit by a car being a miracle? I think those are completely different reference classes, and you can't do this frequentist approach to it. If that makes sense. So I think the better way to assess, I'm not going to answer the question because I just don't think there is an answer to a miracle being, if that makes sense. So I think the better question to ask would probably be something like, well, how do you measure the prior probability, or how do you at least get close? And my answer to that would just be something along the lines of, I'm not going to put hard numbers on it. I'm going to use epistemic ranges, like it's modestly expected, not expected, or highly expected. And you kind of just go about that through simplicity and a priori reasoning. So, would there actually be motivation for God to do this miracle, or would there not be? You ask those types of questions and kind of assess from there.
I want Paul to answer too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Well, for me, it's gonna it's gonna be equal to whatever my prior probability is that God exists.
Yeah, right? 100%.
So whatever low value I'm putting on, does God exist? Because if you get me to God exists, then miracles are easy. So
yeah, right. But even if God exists, I'm pushing back against myself here. But even if God exists, right? I even then we still have to ask the question, what's the prior probability that God actually did this miracle?
I agree. The prior probability of an individual miracle has got to be lower than slightly lower than whether God exists, but it can't be higher than whether God exists.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So when I answered that question, I was just kind of assuming my background knowledge of theism is probably true. Independent of that, I would say, that whatever's in your background, this is with Bayesian reasoning, but whatever's in your background knowledge is going to affect how you assess the prior of any given event, right? So,
am I here? Because I see myself frozen on the screen there. Am I moving around?
You look funny.
You are. I thought you went to sleep.
Oh, this is terrible.
Dan's talking about probability theory.
Yeah. Anyway, real quick, if I could jump on the question of, gosh, I have to look at myself like this. Should I refresh my own self here? Is that going to kick me out?
No.
I would just say, as long as there's a possibility that God exists and that there is the possibility that there's an afterlife that God would like to tell us about, then the probability, at least, we have to put it at non-zero. And anything with a non-zero prior can be swamped with enough positive evidence for it. And so I'm going to go back to sleep now, guys.
I agree with everything you said, by the way.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you for the super chat. I think everything that was written down in the ancient world was believed to be real. No one ever wrote fiction outside of theater, so why think gospels are more real than any old saga from any sect? I don't agree. I don't think that the only time fiction was written in the ancient world was theater. Eric's trying to get in here, but it says device not detected. So I'm waiting on him to be able to insert back in here. But so I would already be like, there were different categories of genre other than just plays.
I'm still trying to reread through the question because, like you, Derek, I kind of disagree with that starting principle.
And I think Mark's trying to say the Gospels are plays. And I have heard there is a scholar out there that thinks Mark may have been an act of some sort. That it's like a play, like the curtain opens.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I think what Eric and I would probably point to would be just some of the data points that seem more likely on the condition that the reportage model of the Gospels is true versus some other model, right? So like Eric and I would point to like undesigned coincidences and say like this seems more likely on the reportage model than this being a play, or something like unified personalities throughout the Gospels. Those are hard to, even in movies, right? Like some person's character is really hard to keep together if you're just making up a play or making up a story. But throughout the Gospels, we have characters kind of acting consistently. Just little data points like that I would point to say like it's more expected you'd see something like this on a reportage model than a play model.
I missed the question. I'm sorry, guys.
It's all good. You
muted? Yes.
I know. Sorry.
It's really, I think Fan answered it, and we got plenty more to get into
that's fine.
From his perspective. But
Totally
I don't rule out the possibility that Mark is used that way. But Jesus is a Muslim. They replaced Barnabas with false apostle Paul.
Okay.
Thank you for the super chat.
I don't know what that means.
There's so many ideas that come up. Wayne Rossi, what do you think about the passage in Matthew where some of the disciples doubted? This seems curious to me. Could it reflect memory of dissent?
I like this question. This is a good question. I don't think that the appearance in Galilee, I think this is very possible where Paul's appearance at the 500 would have happened. Because I think there were already appearances in Jerusalem that were in a more intimate setting. And it gets complicated, but I think the Galilee appearance was more of a larger group appearance. We know he had like the 70 that he commissioned. I don't think that Jesus just appeared to the 12 and that's it. I think he appeared to several people. And so I think if it's a crowd, doubt is going to be very possible. So again, that sounds like harmonizing, and I know that's dirty harmonizing, and Dale Allison would hit me with a book on the top of my head and tell me that that's bad. And but yeah, that's what I think.
But aren't the doubt? I'm trying to remember. Aren't the doubt passages primarily in John? What in Matthew are the doubt stories?
Matthew 28. So I actually wrote an article, Minimal Doubts article on academia. It's the only article I've had time in light of my.
But Matthew 28, you're talking about the Great Commission section?
It's post-resurrection. It may be 27, but let me see.
It's 28:17, I believe.
Yeah, so now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, where you
yes, it is.
Yeah, they went on the mountain. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted.
It's been a while since I had to quote these things. So yeah, thank you. Yeah,
so I kind of picked up on this doubting tradition that I found a thread throughout that I went back and mentioning Paul, but I found this thread that like if you do take this as memory, that some of the apostles themselves weren't sure what they were seeing or experiencing, weren't really as confident about what that post-resurrection experience was. And there's so many different ways of answering this and having different conclusions about how you're approaching this material. But I thought, well, there seems to be at least this consistent material throughout of a doubting tradition for the earliest apostles. They were called disciples in the Gospels, but the American Cuban says, can you disprove hell? This is the single greatest stumbling block for those considering deconversion. The fear does not allow the mind to be logical. And I'm going to pop these down each time if you need me to pop them back up, because I hate that they cover you guys at the bottom.
Oh, I don't look that good, so, but Paul does. Well, okay, so as an annihilationist, just even from like a philosophical standpoint, I don't know where you land the plane here, Eric. We haven't actually talked about it, so I just think given like a perfectly loving God, our intuitions when it comes to like moral things are very helpful data points for assessing things, and so I have trouble squaring away eternal torment as a way of justice. And so I think you can kind of derive an evidential argument against the doctrine of hell, at least a priori, from like philosophical grounds. And I think you can even exegete it through scripture, that annihilationism is a better option to interpret the data from as well. That's at least like my bird's eye view, 30-second pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I probably hold the traditional view, but I think that there are good arguments for the annihilation view. Just from an exegetical standpoint, Edward Fudge wrote a really good book on the topic. I can't remember the name of it all of a sudden. Fire That Consumes, I believe. And so, I mean, I could see the argument for that. I just think it's not been the traditional view for thousands or hundreds and a couple thousand years. So it's harder for me to make that jump. But yeah, I don't know. The point is he's like saying, well, you can't reason because you're scared. And so obviously, well, I mean, there are lots of different religions that say there's hell. And so I'm not like, I don't think that my reason is just so frozen that I can't assess evidence for the different claims that are being made. And nor did I even really feel like, even when I was exploring Christianity, like I wasn't waking up in cold sweats at night thinking, oh no, if I don't figure out what the right religion is, I'm going to go to hell. Maybe some people have problems with that. Maybe they really internalize that anxiety. And if you do, I mean, maybe get some help. But I don't think that played a major factor in my deciding what is true and what's not true. Nor do I think that Christians should just try and bludgeon people over the head with the threat of hell in order to get them to convert. I mean, I think you should be honest about what you believe. I think you should be honest about what you believe the Bible says about it. But there's so much more to Christianity than just a fire insurance. I think that's a very emaciated, fundamentalist, King James only, kind of weird way of looking at it. Like there's a King James only Bible church not too far from me, and there's like angels literally throwing people.
Right, but Eric, here's the thing: when you are raised in that, when you are raised in that, and you would acknowledge that there are denominations that preach a very fire and brimstone hell.
Yeah, they are. I agree.
And I was in one, and I've talked to hundreds of people who've deconverted, and fear of hell is very consistently the very last thing to go. And it took me years to not wake up and be afraid that maybe I might be going to hell. So it's a real thing when you're not starting from scratch. I think when you're starting from people who start from scratch have less of a problem with this. So
would you say that it's influenced you in a negative way of finding what you believe is right, though? Like, do you think that the fear of hell tripped up your reasoning?
I feel like I held on to religion longer than I held on to Christianity longer than I would have if I hadn't been afraid of hell. Absolutely.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Just to tackle the question from my perspective, you can't falsify some of this stuff, but I think there's an approach we can take, and that is, I've had scholars come on talking about God's body, right? Looking at God using heuristic approach of ancient Near Eastern documents, the name El that is in the Canaanite literature, and seeing the name El, the God that is described in earlier Canaanite tradition in the biblical framework. And you kind of watch and see what humans have done with God over a very long period of time. And so you start seeing, okay, God becomes the Platonic outside space and time God that can intercede into time, but like is this all-powerful, all-loving, omniscient, omnibenevolent, et cetera, type deity, whereas you see him as an ancient Near Eastern deity when you look further back. And I would say the same approach I would take if you're wanting to study hell and you're trying to kind of relieve yourself on what's going on here, you can see that this Hades, for example, in the Greek, they had portals. We call them portals, and we imagine it's an alternative realm, but they actually had physical places where they believed where springs would come up into the underworld. So they believed that hell was in the earth. When you now start looking at science, start to understand, more about what we're looking at, and you go, is hell underneath us really inside this ball we're spinning on, we call Earth? You can logically start to reason yourself out of saying, maybe this is a construct developed by humans and our perception on trying to understand. Now, I'm coming from a completely radical different worldview. If I was within the Christian bubble or even the ancient Egyptian bubble, they believed in post-tortures and stuff of people who did bad in life, things like that. So I feel like there's this intuition for humans to say, I didn't get what I deserved in this life, and Billy over there took advantage of everyone his whole life, and he had a great life. He needs punishment. I need reward. And you get these natural inclinations that happen. But I felt like over the years when I learned that, realized this was not the only religion that had this concept, that it's just almost like a human ubiquitous hope. Even reincarnation kind of tries to deal with the problem of evil. It's all a problem of evil way of trying to solve it. So that I have a person, I'll leave it at this, that is deconverting, that has been messaging me, and I've been telling them, please go speak to a doctor. It is so bad for them, this thing. And it wasn't on that level for me, even though I probably could have used talking to somebody, like me and Paul probably could have used talking to somebody. It would have helped maybe speed up the process. They're so like trapped in this that I've encouraged them to go back to Christianity. Like, if you are that suffering and it is that bad, get right with God. I mean, that's coming from an atheist. In my mind, I'm going, don't live in this nightmare that you put yourself into, because your rational mind in some way is saying you don't believe this is true. And yet you're so afraid of the concept, what if I'm wrong thing. That is what they're dealing with. And this gets into that Craig statement. Remember, I lower, if there's a chance, 1 in a million after hearing the good news, anyway.
Yeah.
That was my little long-winded spiel, but
sure. Well, I will say, just as a Christian, I don't want to like apologize on behalf of all Christians and do the silly flagellate myself thing. But at the same time, I think Than and I would agree, like, we feel sympathy for people who have gone through those things, as maybe not has experienced the phobia. And it's unfortunate that stuff is out there. And we would agree that like an overemphasis on that in a hyper fundamentalist kind of way is a bad and unhealthy thing.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't grow up as a Christian, and when I became a Christian, one of the first like huge turnoffs for me that sent me into my agnostic stage after I became a Christian was people trying to jackhammer me with dogmatism and all this other stuff. So while I can't relate to how growing up in that world to you guys, I can at least sympathize with some of my experiences. And I agree, it's just very frustrating. And I still deal with that.
The other thing that helped me, of course, was just the idea, just look at the Christian versus Christian debate on what hell is like, and then think to yourself, well, if God wanted this message of hell to be clear, why is it so unclear? Like, that was actually comforting to me in that, well, if God wanted us to fear eternal conscious torment, it feels like he would have been a lot more clear about that than the Bible is. And the fact that so much debate amongst Bible believing Christians can happen, that that's not the only way to interpret this message. So
thank you
for what that's worth.
Christine Elise, thank you for the super chat. Just joining in, how would you respond to those who say God was working with the morals of the time and that morality evolved according to his plan? Thank you.
Is that a question for us or for you guys?
I think so.
Okay. So I hold to William Webb's thesis, at least a modified version of it, if you guys are familiar with it, when it comes to just like the ethical issues in the Old Testament and stuff like that regarding slavery, all that jazz. And so one of the things I would disagree with is that morals are changing over time. Rather, what I would say is like something like the proposition slavery is wrong was true even back then. It's just that God allowed those things in order to work with people. So it's not the fact that God is like okay with slavery, or like he's saying it's a good thing and then later on changed his mind and said it's a good thing. I'm not a divine command theorist either. I don't think that God like says what's right and wrong and therefore it's right and wrong. I think that there are moral truths that exist and God knows what those moral truths are. So the basic idea here would just be kind of correcting that in the first place and just saying like, no, like God is not changing morality over time, but rather what's happening is God is slowly revealing and changing the course of humanity towards a greater ethic. And the analogy that William Webb uses and I use is just imagine the lines of scrimmage on a football field. The end zone is the ultimate ethic, and God's just moving you line of scrimmage by line of scrimmage towards that ultimate ethic, where men and women are equal and slavery is wrong. All people are equal, stuff like that.
Paul?
Eric?
Paul, the other Christian here. Paul can jump in if he wants to, or I could jump in. I don't care. Whoever.
Go for it,
I probably would agree with some of that. I think, I mean, if you read, Jesus himself is approached and they're like, hey, can we divorce and remarry somebody else just basically because we feel like it? And Jesus is like, well, Moses allowed that because you're hard-hearted. But then he points to the creational order of things. Like in the beginning, this isn't the way that it was. And I know they're very popular, but the Bible Project actually has a really good podcast on that particular topic. And they go into a lot of the scholarly stuff as far as like the Old Testament and some of the weird laws and some of the things that we see are like, oh, that's bad. But that's kind of the heuristic, if that's the right word that I would use with that, is like, I think there were a lot of things that wasn't like his ultimate ideal. And he's always trying to push people towards that goal line, like Than was saying. And I think it's because of the hardness of people's hearts. And it's just the kingdom of God is like, the leaven, you put a little bit in and it spreads throughout the whole dough. And I think that there's a progressive kind of way that things can work themselves out toward a creational ethic. And that's all I have to say about that.
I actually have, regarding like slavery specifically, I'm actually working with Josh Bowen on a video, believe it or not. Because him and I agree on the majority of stuff that when it comes to the conversation. So that's something you guys can look forward to at some point.
Awesome.
Did you want to comment on that, Paul?
I guess I would say is that if I ever become a Christian again, if I ever become convinced Christianity is true, none of these kind of explanations, neither the one that the super chatter put forth, nor the ones that I just heard from Eric and Fan, would satisfy me. But I would land in the camp of, well, God has justified reasons that I don't understand.
Well, so almost like a skeptical theism type thing.
I think so, because
okay.
that is entirely unsatisfying.
Well, Paul, you and I could always have a conversation separately about this, because I only just gave like the Cliff Notes version of it, right? Because I this is one of those reasons where I was really doubting whether or not like we can really say the whole corpus of the Bible is like inspired or anything like that. And I was kind of ready to let it go until I ran into Webb's stuff. So I can send you the books too if you want, but sure.
I want to make a brief critical comment about the slavery thing, since that was an example. Obviously, we all agree that's morally just horrible. But Jennifer Glancy, who is a Christian, by the way, she's not like an apologist in any way. She has done a lot of research on slavery in the first century. I interviewed her book, Slavery as a Moral Problem in Early Church and Today. The fact that some early Christians were slaves does not present a moral problem for Christians today. The fact that some early Christians were slave holders does. Jennifer Glancy tackles questions that continue to haunt contemporary men and women inside and outside of the churches. Why didn't Jesus speak out forcefully against slavery? Why didn't the early church see slavery as fundamentally incompatible with the gospel? Were there any bright moments when some Christians, in fact, drew that conclusion? And she highlights a few throughout history. And why don't we know more about them? Why didn't Christianity have more of an impact on slaveholding in the Roman Empire? And what lessons can we learn as we face moral catastrophes? And she goes on and on. But 2 comments. The Essenes, there were some Essenes who practiced no slavery. and they said it was a crime against humanity. But in her book, she goes through several of the stories in the Gospels where Jesus is using slavery as an example, not condemning it, using it. So for me, since this is the pinnacle guy of Christianity, and he is the best representative of morality in Christian, it's like, to spin it another way, taking it off Jesus for Christians, Muhammad, let's just say he really did marry a 9-year-old. Let's just say he really was a warlord. Let's go with the ugliest picture painted by like David Wood and those guys who want to go to Hadith and say, hey, this guy was this bad. But he is the moral standard of all time. I would say, using that analogy, and of course, I would still say that if that were true of Muhammad, that's far worse than what I would say Jesus in this case. But the fact that he doesn't take that stand and literally condemn it, and he is at that point, one has to make other arguments, in my opinion, to try and say, well, it's just a guy, he's working with what he has, and like,
I guess, I don't know. I mean, Paul called himself a bondservant of Christ.
Right.
So I don't really have a problem thinking of myself as a slave to God in a certain sense. I mean, I'd be curious to read that book. I wonder what she says about like Philemon and the story between
she gets into all of it,
Onesimus and all that other stuff. Because I guess I see like taking on slavery back then in the Roman world, and this is maybe something you could answer for me, Derek, like, it was so ingrained in the warp and whoop, it would completely, like, the whole economy would just was based on it. And so I think it would be difficult to just get up and say, I don't know, but I mean I'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
Eric, here's my problem with it, brother. And just being frank, you're dealing with people who are literally part of a new kingdom. They don't care about the empire. The end is near. They are a part of a new kingdom. They are part of a new family. They are willing, like, if we go read some of these early church martyrs, they want to get ground in the teeth of the lions. They are looking to die. They want this. And so this gets into a whole different thing about persecution, like as if people were after them. Some of them were wanting to die for the faith. And so there's all sorts of things that I would say, if they're willing to buck against the world like that, then slavery is just one more tab on the shoulder. I just can't imagine that they thought of it in that way. The Christian community cared about slavery as a model because they worked with it. And she goes into this. Part of the morality of Christianity is built through slavery. And that's what she actually goes into in the book. But Friedrich Nietzsche highlighted this as well. And I think that the grassroots movement of Christianity depended on kind of the slaves in the community. And that the whole ethic of Jesus is the last, the least, the poor, they will be rich. They will be first. They will be the greatest. And that is the ethic. So it wouldn't have worked for the guy at the top. The rich young man had to go sell everything. Probably didn't. I mean, in that particular gospel, the point is like, it's that kind of philosophy. And if this was an all-time morally like horrible thing that we know it is today, I think they would have said something about it if they knew that it was bad.
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a Gandhi view of Jesus a little bit, but that's a whole different discussion, and one that I honestly would like to be more studied in. So, what's the name of the author again?
Jennifer Glancy.
Okay, thank you. And it's okay. I'll check that out.
Humanist Reformation. It's only a tape recorder when Christianity wants to legislate their beliefs. It's unreliable when it's scrutinized. It's only a tape recorder when Christianity wants.
Yeah, I don't know.
I assume this is in reference to when Eric at one point mentioned he was weighing whether or not what the words of Jesus that we have in the Gospels,
thing. Yeah, that was his
whether they are a tape recorder version or is it the gist. I think I'm guessing that's what.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that it was unreliable. I'm just saying that they could be narrating things in a different way. They could be chunking things in.
Mm-hmm.
They could be organizing what Jesus said in different ways. That's all that I was saying. To me, this is just like I'm not looking to legislate the Bible on people. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not a Christian nationalist. I think Christian nationalism is bad.
I was just gonna say,
Like,
I don't
like,
think Eric and I would. I think Eric and I would both kind of argue against Christian nationalism and legislating things
more of a
based off of what the
libertarian.
Bible says. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can't justify it apart from the Bible, I'm not going to force it.
I was just about to say, I think me and Paul would both say that the biblical option is not the government.
Yeah.
Christ is not of this world. So let's
Yeah,
try,
he said, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom was, my servants would fight. If you don't like Christian nationalism, look at Greg Boyd, Myth of the Christian Nation, Myth of it's an interesting book. Mennonites. I mean, Paul didn't grow up if you're a Mennonite, Paul, you didn't even enroll to be.
That's correct. No, my whole family lineage is running from being forced to be in armies and things. Yeah.
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 I am putting in the chat, and I'm making this vocal. Please, no more super chat questions. If you feel like supporting the channel, you can. I want to make sure Paul doesn't hate me. I mean, he already does, but he won't tell me. But we want him to be willing to come back and join me on these and not be like, oh, another 3-hour adventure with MythVision. Great. Chris Haynes, Derek, are you planning on interviewing an expert in Jainism, Sikhism anytime in the future? I probably will. I mean, look, this is the beginning of the channel, and eventually I will expand my knowledge into other religions and spend more time diving into their mythos and doing all that fun stuff. So I imagine that will happen at some point, and I'm just having fun right now. So I'm thankful for those who are journeying with me and bearing with my patience.
I have some connections with some scholars that are specialists in Jainism and Sikhism. So if you're ever going to go down that route, just let me know and I'll get you in touch.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. Let me see something. There we go. Pop it up. Please, no more super chat questions. Okay, super chat is Hidden Gnosis. Thank you for that. I like the name, by the way. Christians, how do you separate allegory from history? Paul in Galatians 4 says part of Abraham's story is allegory, and Philo basically thinks all of Genesis is allegory and symbolic. It seems the first century writers were very loose with history. Thank you for that big super chat.
I mean, I think Paul is kind of clear when he's trying to make an allegory. I don't think that he thinks that Abraham didn't exist or Sarah didn't exist, because he talks about himself being a descendant of Abraham in other places. And so I don't think that he thinks that the Genesis story is allegory. I think he's taking people who he believes are real people, and he's using them as an allegory. Just like I could talk about, I don't know, anybody from real history, Abraham Lincoln or something, and come up with some kind of allegory to talk about them. And so when it comes to like reading Genesis, like the first few chapters, I mean, you have to look at the kind of genre and different stuff like that. I think when the Gospels are being written, I think that they're pretty clear that they're trying to relate that they're history, just judging from Luke's prologue. I know Derek will push back and we could argue for 2 hours on this. But I think that they're trying to say that they're reporting the facts. I think John is saying, hey, I'm giving you testimony here. And I think that we have a number of ways to confirm that is what they're doing. And I think there's a number of ways that I think the early church received these documents, is that's the way they were written. And so you can see that in a number of the fathers. And so, yeah, I don't think that it's that difficult to tell. Obviously, I'm not reading something like the Psalms or the first few chapters of Genesis or certain other things the way that I would read the Gospels. There's just different, it's a library of books, and they all are writing in different styles and different genres.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hidden Gnosis, for that 50. I really appreciate it. Here is his YouTube channel, actually. I went and double checked to make sure. So if you're interested, subscribe to Hidden Gnosis. Catchy name, especially since I'm friends with Neil from Gnostic Informant. Robert Hollander became a member. You are now totally saved. I really appreciate it. We have a salvation plan as well. It just costs money to be saved here.
It's a monthly salvation subscription.
Yes. Don't resubscribe.
I think that's how the Reformation got kicked off.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Getting to our next one here is Blake again. Blake's back. Thoughts on claim God doesn't send anyone to hell. We send ourselves. Hell is locked from inside. Doesn't Parable of 10 Virgins in Matthew 10:28 contradict that? So I guess the idea that people send themselves to hell.
Sure. I don't think anybody's going to hell just based on ignorance. Just like, oh, I didn't know. Sorry, God. You know, like, oh, too bad. You're going to hell. I mean, I do agree that, like, if you look at like the parable of the 10 virgins, it seems like there was certainly remorse, and they were like, let us in, and all that other stuff. Then I also look at like the rich man and Lazarus. Again, these are parables. These are stories. He's not necessarily like, how literal, like, do you stretch these out and take them, where you have the rich man who's basically like, send Lazarus to just relieve me, but he doesn't want to leave. And so those are just kind of two different parables that seem to be giving kind of semi different messages. And so if there are people in hell, I'm sure there are some that don't want to be there. And I don't know, it gets us into a whole other topic to for forever. And Dan's an annihilationist, so he's going to say eventually they're just going to get kind of turned to ash anyways.
Well, yeah. So when I say I'm an annihilationist, I think that term gets misunderstood a little bit sometimes. I think the more accurate term would be conditional immortality, meaning that dead people just stay dead. They just cease to exist. That's all. But I think that parable of the 10 virgins too, some people might interpret that more about the eschaton versus like heaven and hell. And can you guys hear drilling in the background?
I can.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to mute for now then.
Yeah, I was like, am I at the dentist for a minute? That's all right. This is a Frank Turek, right, talking point that basically the idea is that we go to hell, that we could leave if we want to, but that we keep getting our sentence extended because we keep sinning while we're there. Does that fit with your view of
me? No.
Of eternal? Go ahead.
I don't know. I don't know if I would go there with that. Just you keep sinning, and so God's just gonna keep punishing you. And so, to be honest, I'm just gonna say I don't really know.
Okay, fair enough.
This is just something where I've studied it several years ago. I read different views. I'm persuaded universalism is probably not a biblical option on the table. I think annihilationism is. I'm just hesitant because I tend to just consult church history as well. Yeah, it's a heavy doctrine. I mean, if there was something I could erase and change a little bit, then sure. And so I don't think that it's just like you just keep sinning. I mean, I would imagine if you are in hell, you're probably angry at God. You were probably angry at your situation. You may not want to change. You may, so maybe there's a little bit of truth to that, but I don't know. I just don't like the blunt way that he puts it, I guess. Okay, I'm sure there's a better nuanced way to put it. And it's just something, now I got people pounding on things in the background that I just need to look into more. And I don't want to give a crappy, cheesy Christian answer. I just say, hey, this is a topic I need to explore more. I'm far more interested in historicity, reliability, and things like that. It's more of a theological issue. It's important, but yeah, I'm just.
Can I ask a question about something you said on this question? So you said that you don't think anyone goes to hell because of a lack of knowledge. I guess I'm wondering, do you think that salvation is a two-step process? Do you think that the first step is some sort of, however you want to describe it, intellectual assent, and then a second step is to like welcome and embrace lordship, or to take that intellectual assent and then take it to another level? Is your view of salvation that two-step process?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to put into probably the right words. I'm probably not being the most articulate here. I think salvation is ultimately, to use a Greek word, maybe Than will get excited here, but is theosis. I think it's coming.
Heck yeah.
I think salvation is becoming more like God. I think it's becoming letting his life inside of you and letting that life have its way and mortifying your sin, growing in the nature of God, letting him live through you. I don't think I don't hold like a real super Protestant view of like
Gotcha.
you just believe and you're justified, and that's the end of it. I think
No, and
it's
that's why I sort of put
yeah.
it as a two-step thing. Like there's got to be
Yeah.
an intellectual
Yeah,
assent, and then there's
you
whatever.
you need knowledge.
you need
sure.
the intellectual assent in order
Okay,
to
so
do
that's
that
the
stuff,
question.
right?
So
Yes.
all
So
the stuff, the theodicy you described, that a prerequisite to that is some level of intellectual assent, right?
Yeah,
would
yeah. I
agree.
mean, you need to hear the message and to receive and to
So
grow in that.
yeah, Paul, I'm assuming you're just kind of taking this with the problem of divine hiddenness.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
that's correct.
So I forgot the guy's name because I believe in post-mortem opportunity for people that cannot be held epistemically culpable or morally culpable.
Is that
So-
biblical though? I mean,
Yeah.
is it-
So I always have a issue when the question is that biblical is asked.
well, I
because-
ask because I could see why someone would make that excuse up if they are trying to rationalize why people haven't heard the gospel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm going to push back on your word of like excuse there too, because
Well, I'm saying that because I could imagine if I were saying, "What about the guys over here on an island that never got the gospel?"
You'd be
don't
motivated
worry,
to
they
say
get
that.
a chance.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know?
I totally get where you're coming from. It's not an ad hoc supposition, and Eric might disagree with me here, but I don't think it's like an ad hoc thing to add on, especially like if our base theory of theism would entail that be the case, if that makes sense.
But if that is the case, then by staying completely neutral in this life, do I not have the advantage of making a choice based on perfect knowledge after I die, as opposed to trying to make a choice based on imperfect knowledge now?
See,
Yeah,
this is.
so-
Go ahead,
go ahead,
Nathan. No, you go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So this is where I'm going to make a distinction between a few different things. Because one, I'm not saying I know where the line is between like epistemic and moral culpability and not culpability. I don't know where that line would be, right? And I'm not going to sit here and pretend I do because I don't have access to your inner thoughts, and I'm not going to psychologize you because I hate when people do that to me. So that's
no, but we could use rather as an example, like someone who was born before they die, like a stillbirth, right?
Yeah, so like they can't be
Yeah,
held
absolutely.
morally responsible. I think some young Earth creationists might take like Romans 5:12, and they'll misinterpret that as inherited guilt. I don't think that's what that's actually saying. Though it's inherited death, and so
That's probably a bad example because God probably doesn't. That person.
There's no way
before
they
that-
could have been held
Right,
culpable,
they're
right?
probably not. There's probably no hell option for
So
that person.
one of the examples I use, for instance, there's two different ones. One is going to be just people that have no access to the gospel whatsoever, just completely separated, and there's people groups that we know that are like that, right? And the other example I would just use is people that are like mentally handicapped to the point that like there's no way that they could be held epistemically culpable, right? Those two types of people, I think, will be granted post-mortem opportunity.
And
But the rest of us fall under Romans.
Well, I don't know.
1:20.
So like again, I don't know. I don't have access to your inner thoughts, Paul, right?
Yeah.
So I would like to take you on your word. I have no reason to doubt your word that you're not that you're a non-resistant non-believer, right? And so if that's actually the case, I think you're doing your due diligence by investigating things, and if you died today or something like that or whatever, I hope you don't. But if you died today, I think that you'd be facing God and given an opportunity.
I don't really have a big problem with that at all. In the sense that I don't like the whole Pascal's wager thing. And I guess this is where I would throw in a different person's wager. This is Joseph Butler, where he just basically says if Christianity is possibly true, then like do your best to fully understand it. I'm not saying you have to pretend you believe like Pascal and just live the Christian life, even though you don't, because I don't think that we can do that kind of like voluntarism and just will what we believe. And so I think if you're doing your due diligence, I don't think somebody who's like really trying to study Christianity and is really trying to understand Christianity and they is going to just be like, no, that's too bad. Like if they're in the process. And so I think Butler's wager is more defensible because it's like, just take the time, really get to be able to steel man the argument for Christianity. And at worst, what are you going to do? You're going to be a very effective counter apologist, I guess. And so I would just say, like, if I was in your shoes, Paul, is just do your intellectually, honestly best. And I'm not saying that you are or not, because I can't psychologize you.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Just do your intellectually
Paul's
due diligence. Evil. Paul is evil. That's right. Paul is evil. No, I'm just kidding. I get those in my comments, but I'm just kidding. But yeah, if you're doing your intellectually best, then I think then I don't see why God is going to like punish you for forever or for temporarily. I think he wants as many people to be saved as possible. And so now what I will say is just like I would like I think that's where our job as Christian apologists comes in, is we should be trying to give our best arguments so that that information is even available to you in the first place. And in some ways, I think apologetics has failed a lot of people. I'll put it that way. And so, but this is why I don't like the psychologizing on any side. And I don't like when I see it in my own comments, because I'm like, I don't really know what these people are thinking, unless I have good reasons to. If there's other reasons to think something, then sure, I might bring it up, but I try and stay away from that. Anyway.
Yeah. Paul, was that, did I answer your question? Are you good?
You actually did.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
So we're going to try and get through these supers. Like I said, Paul's not only evil, but he'll hate me if we don't try to make this.
I also derailed that.
He'll hate you. He'll hate you more than he hates.
I'm living an inconsistent life here, Derek.
I've written lots of stories. My one black friend, thank you for the super chat. It is remarkably easy to keep characters consistent. Anyone trying should make a bullet point list of philosophies and actions, reactions of their characters. So this is, I think, a point back where you were saying, like, having the apostles having a consistent character throughout the Gospels as like implausible, unless this is real or something.
Yeah, no. So Eric, when somebody asked a question about why we should think like the Gospels aren't plays instead of like the reportage models or something like that. And one of the data points I brought up is the consistent characters throughout the Gospels and the New Testament.
Yeah.
That's the context here.
Okay.
So one of my pushbacks there would just be the fact that, one, we don't have just one person with the Gospels and the New Testament in general having a consistent set of characters. We actually have multiple authors keeping a consistent character set all throughout the way. That's one of my pushbacks. But Eric, if you have anything else, go ahead.
It's subtle. It's to use Apologia's favorite word, casual, because I'm just messing with them a little bit there. The way that they do that, but also it's the consistency. It's also the fact that, like, and this is where you guys would probably push back, is the whole modern realistic genre of historical fiction just wasn't really a thing until later. So it's a little anachronistic to say that. And then if you just want to look at the lack of consistency, just read some of the other apocryphal gospels or apocryphal acts and just compare apples with apples, or I would say apples with oranges.
Thank you so much. Thoughts on near-death experience research? Was it WRT afterlife hypothesis? I don't know what that is.
With respect to.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm a little skeptical of it, to be honest with you. I don't think there's a really good criteria to assess these things, and let's kind of keep it at that. I'm just skeptical, and I don't think it's methodologically sound enough yet for me to say anything. So I would probably veer on the side of just saying, like, this isn't really a good talking point. But
yeah, I would say too. I just think there's better arguments to use than near-death experiences, and it's not something I'm not really interested in.
I heard that Death had a near-death experience of Chuck Norris. That's for sure. I
want to plug my video Case for Heaven on that on my whole expose of.
Oh, you do have that on? Is that on the big channel?
Yeah, I have a whole. I took the whole movie, every NDE in the movie, and went through them, and it's not
That's
great.
in the biggie. Okay, I'm pulling it up. The Case for Heaven is dismissed. Lee Strobel response. That one.
Yarp.
All right, I'm gonna just yarp.
Yeah, I did. And I also I also actually hired the movie trailer guy in that. There's a fun little There's a fun little snippet in that video.
This is it here.
Case for heaven, yeah.
So I just posted it in the chat.
The one actually. Oh yeah, that's the right one. Yeah, that was the right one.
Okay,
perfect.
Making sure. Well, you got two here.
I pulled up the one little trailer that I made and made a separate video, which is just more silly fun. But
got it. That's like 30-something seconds. Awesome. Yeah. I posted it in the chat. Go check it out. Sure. Imnag in the house. There is something to be said about the illiteracy rate in the ancient world. It would have been much easier to convince the masses of miracles and gods.
I mean, I think that people in the ancient world know that dead people stay dead and virgins typically don't get pregnant. Although I know I could see Derek's eyes lighting up, even though they're shut.
We totally don't agree.
Yeah. And so I think that they do know that.
I mean, look, even Revelation tells you about, so you look at Revelation and its use of the Sibylline oracles, there's Nero Redivivus. Like, people believe Nero like died and came back. People were thinking all sorts of stuff. There are several cults, even this is in a video coming out with me and Matthew Hartkey. There's a cult, and I hope to eventually end up on Apologia's Wall of Fame, the Hall of Fame of cartoons one day. But in Gospel of John chapter 4, in the commentary of Origin, he brings up these the Diocletians. I can't remember the name. They're a Samaritan group that had a guy named Dicethius or something. I don't even know his actual name. They believed he was the Messiah and that he's still alive after his death to this very day. So, and this is something N.T. Wright completely misses, but I would totally disagree on the idea of virgin births. Even Plutarch talks about Plato's birth through the pneuma and dynamos of the god. Like, there's so many examples and accounts of various things like this. That's why when I use the whole walk like a duck thing and Michael just like, I don't understand. I'm like, at least understand what I'm trying to say, even if you disagree with me. That's the frustration, is that I'm looking at all these other various, I'll use the term superstitions for people who believe in these different legends and myths and accounts. So that's what
and that's where we went back to our discussion, that people can check out. I guess we can plug for the sake of time, where we just kind of went back and forth on that for a good while. To me, it's like, how else is God going to communicate a revelation unless he just is like going to appear to everybody, but by miracles? And so if there is going to be some way that he communicates revelation, it will be by that. And it's going to look maybe to people later like, oh, that's a myth, obviously, because there's something supernatural. But I don't also make my whole case for Christianity just based on the text either. I'm kind of a maximalist where I will want to bring in some of the modern miracles as well as like a tiebreaker, because I think that's even what the apostles did, is they didn't just say we were witnesses to the resurrection. They demonstrated it, or they pointed to things that demonstrated it. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Well, to that super chat, I don't think literacy is an inoculation against bad epistemology, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Yeah,
people believe some really wrong or really non-justified things and can read. Like that's just,
and are scholars.
Yeah,
and I'm sure people would say that about our Christian scholars.
Yeah,
like,
of course. Like, it's just that's no guarantee of anything. So
I don't even know how to read. So
I think that it's there's so much we can. Yeah, I'm with you guys on that. David Aaron Hill, thank you for the super chat. Do you believe Origin unit himself?
I've heard different things about that. Like, I heard that he did, and then I don't know. It's not something I've really looked into. That's definitely taking Matthew 5 very literally, which I don't think that's what Jesus had in mind. But yeah, anyway.
I think he probably did.
Yeah, I just haven't looked into it enough to have an opinion. So
yeah. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate it. Did Paul, did you want to?
I spend very little time thinking about who did or did not.
Vesper, thank you. What makes the internal state of someone's belief or non-belief a moral principle worthy of sending someone to heaven or hell over? Isn't that cultish?
My answer would be that it doesn't. That there is no like moral principle worthy of sending someone to heaven or hell over, based off of your like intellectual assent to any proposition. So that's why I believe in postmortem opportunity.
But also, it's just clear that like demons, if you're going to accept Christianity on its face value, like demons believed and they shuddered, and they don't go to, like, there are people who had perfect knowledge and were still able to say no. So clearly intellectual assent is not. Oh, and there's the sheep and separating the sheep and the goats. So there's a second step beyond that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Aurelian, if thou couldst ask of the living Jesus a question, what would it be?
Well, oh man.
So we're going to have totally different questions. I can't wait to see what the differences look like.
Yeah. Okay. Look, this is about as unacademic as it gets, but I'd probably ask him if I could have like Saiyan powers from Dragon Ball Z. That's the first thing that came to my head. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't even know how to answer that one, honestly. I don't know. We'll ask him a question. I don't know. I mean, how's my mom doing? I don't know. Not to make that hard. Well, it was a long time ago. It was like 16 years ago. So I'm not upset about it now. I've come to terms with it, but I don't know. I'll have to think about that one.
If I felt like I was in a conversation with the living Jesus, then I would ask for him to tell me something that I don't have knowledge of, and possibly that no one else has knowledge of, like perhaps the solution to one of the unsolved math problems that I don't even understand what the problem is. If give me that solution, because I would assume that if I am having a conversation with whom I think is the living Jesus, that I'm hallucinating, and therefore what I would really want is something I could externally verify, so that I can later say, oh, I wasn't hallucinating that. I was really talking to the risen Jesus, and that affirms a whole lot of stuff.
So I'm going to jump in as a Christian here and say that Paul is not necessarily wrong for thinking that, right? Because a lot of Christians are going to go, aha, see, even if Jesus appeared to you, Paul, you wouldn't believe. I don't think that there's anything wrong with wanting some kind of like an epistemic tie down to know that you're not hallucinating. If the Virgin Mary appeared to me, if my buddy called me and said at 2:30, did you have something unusual happen to you? And did this person say this? And then they said, okay, yeah, it was the Virgin Mary. Then I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, wow, okay, I might need to reconsider Catholicism or something. So I just want to head off any Christians being like, oh, got him, let's clip this and upload it. He wouldn't believe. I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting some kind of an epistemic tie down to a real life situation. Just like if somebody says that they heard a voice and God spoke to them, well, what did that voice tell you, and how did it actually like pertain to reality with something that, like, if the voice said, hey, take a step over to the left, and then all of a sudden a bullet went whizzing by you, well, that would be a different story than just, you said you heard a voice and it made you feel good or something like that.
Yeah, those are all in categories of things that I would take. Like, I hope I was getting to the point clearly that if I was able to verify that, then I would actually like accept that what happened to me had been real and vertical. I wouldn't continue to doubt it. But, yeah.
I would ask a question that kind of getting behind the theological baggage that we usually debate with Christians on and stuff. Assuming here's an apocalyptic Jew who has a small following, and I was able to ask him, I would probably ask him a specific apocalyptic question, and it would kind of be the falsifying one, rather than like, hey, prove to me by telling me the lottery tickets for 2024. And this, like, it's more like, so when is the end of human history going to happen again? And if he just kind of like, along with what I already think is assumed in the Gospels, goes, it's going to happen here soon, one could probably rationalize beyond this and go, well, that was his human body, so he really didn't know. And so once you have the full 100% God, 100% man scenario here in heaven, he's revealed all things. So he could be wrong about things on earth. For me, it would be enough to he's in the vein of a failed apocalyptic prophet type thing, and I would be able to know it. And then we could tell the Jesus seminar, stop guessing whether or not the guy was an apocalyptic prophet or not. He was, and that would be my question. So there you go. The American Cuban.
He might just answer you with a parable, though, is the thing.
If he answers me with a parable, I just wasted my one question.
You did
I'm screwed.
Because
okay?
I feel like he would create a loop contradiction because no one knows the days of the hour. So if he tells you, then he creates a problem. So he can't tell you. It's I don't know, Eric.
Thank you so much.
I think your criteria was better, Paul. No, I'm just kidding.
If Jesus woke up in 63 AD and met Paul and his churches, would he have gone into a fist fight with Paul for straying from original Christianity, Dr. Tabor?
No, I don't think so, because I think Paul was given the right hand of fellowship by the apostles, and I don't think that he was lying when he said that. I think that you can look at the Gospels and you could look at Paul's teaching and you could exaggerate the differences. And I think the differences often are by scholars exaggerated. I haven't read all of Tabor's stuff. I would like to. I've read him a little bit. I've been enjoying his video series with you talking about Mark and different things like that, Derek. But yeah, I see a lot of more similarities than differences with Paul and Jesus. I get the Paul was a false apostle cult in my comments a lot. And they tell me I'm going to hell because I'm following Paul. And I don't think that nobody in the early church thought that. And
it makes me laugh, man. I'm sorry. I'm just so like, it's your skin gets so thick after a while. You're just like, oh, here goes another one.
More crazy, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I can't answer that question honestly. What would Jesus think about what Paul's doing with his message? It's so hard to get behind the Gospels, in my view, of what Jesus really thought about things. So part of me thinks he was kind of liberal, and part of me thinks he was kind of conservative in his religious respects. So I don't know. I don't know what he would have thought about the Gentile mission. I mean, obviously, a Christian will read the words of Matthew and go, he said to go into all the nations and such. So, but there are others who think, no, this was a Jewish movement, depending on the scholar. So this would be a question to ask Jesus, right? What do you think about that guy, Paul? That might get me a more succinct answer. Skeptics and scoundrels, it's safe to say some, even many, scriptures are contentious, even solely among Christians. What's one scripture you wish God or the inspired writers had written better? How would you improve it?
So how would you improve God's word? You're asking Christians this.
So I think, okay, this could open up a whole can of worms, but I think one of the things that people mistake when it comes to the Christian doctrine of inspiration is that we're not Muslims. In other words, we're not dictationalists. So for instance, like, I just think God inspired means that God oversaw and supervised the writing, compilation, and editing of the biblical corpus, right? And so to say something like, well, what could have been written better, I'd actually, for the most part, at least from where I stand in Western America, I don't think it's really the fault of the authors that we have so much confusion. I think it's the loss of ancient Near Eastern and Greco-Roman context that is the issue. And in Western America, I think we have a lot of Christian anti-intellectualism and a lot of people that use the Holy Spirit as their Bible commentary rather than scholarship. That is the issue. So now to answer the question, I think I wish that maybe a writer, like, for instance, Paul, for instance, I forget the verses, uses a word twice throughout the New Testament. And it's the word formed in English, but it's, in one sense, it's talking about how Adam and Eve were formed, but in the other sense, it's talking about how somebody was spiritually formed. And that word only comes up twice in the New Testament. And it's just like, okay, Paul, why couldn't you just used a word that was already around, that people knew what was going on, instead of making up something new? And been a little bit more clear. Like, little things like that I wish would have been different, but that's just more for didactic purposes than anything else. Did what I said make sense? Or
yeah, no, it made sense. I mean, I was just going to say I agree, and I don't have much to add to that. I think Revelation is an extremely mysterious and weird book. I kind of wish I could understand it a little bit better, but at the same time, I think that's kind of the cool part of it.
What do you wish God's word said differently, Paul?
Well, this is where it's pragmatically, do I think it was God's word, or can I change? Like, because honestly, like my answer is like, the Bible has had so much influence on culture that there are things that I could wish were different. Even if I view it entirely as a secular book, like I wish the Bible was more explicit and clear on how to treat women, how to treat gay and lesbian people, and slaves. So like, and a lot of these marginalized categories, because I feel like the Bible has been used in history to support positions of power over those kind of marginalized people. And if I could wish that the Bible was more clear on that, in a way that would be less likely to be misinterpreted and used in ways to harm others. So those would be, like, as a pure secularist, I do kind of wish the Bible was more explicit in affirming people's humanity across the board. So that's pragmatically. The other side of me, like the guy who's worried that maybe I'm going to go to hell, and I don't know how to choose that right now. That there's no way to get around, like, the testimony is problematic if I'm just going to accept testimony. So I mean, I would love for it to say something that I could more greater hang my hat on. I don't know. Those are my two answers.
Thank you. Christine Elise, happy B-Day soon to Dr. Kip, half a century. By the way, Paul and me are going to be doing some recordings, hopefully at some point here soon, with Kip. His course, The Real Ancient Israelite Religion and Propaganda Throughout the Bible. I can't remember the exact title of the course, but anyway, it's in there, and there's going to be a lot of good stuff. So be on the lookout for Dr. Kill. He's getting old. He's just getting really, really old. Space Lord of 75. About the minimal facts, it feels strange to me that the minimal facts approach doesn't ever seem to be used in history, except for Christianity. I can't find it elsewhere.
Do you want me to defend minimal facts? I mean,
yeah, I mean, like,
no, I mean, I don't think the criteria for minimal facts is necessarily wrong. I mean, it's just looking for facts that are accepted among the majority of scholars and trying to make an inference to the best explanation, which is what historians do all the time. I don't think that they're using unhistorical methods. I think their methods are historical. I just think they lead to an unspectacular conclusion, and I think they limit themselves to a certain data set when you could still use good historical methods to come to a stronger conclusion. And so inference to the best explanation is something that historians do all the time. And I don't think, like, we should confuse sociology with epistemology. So, like, if the majority of scholars don't accept this, then maybe it's not a fact, because we know things have changed, like views have changed over time. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's completely, I think that part of it's faulty. I think I froze again. But anyway, inference to the best explanation isn't bad. I might have to jump out again, and I don't know what's going on with my internet.
Yeah, inference, like, as a method, a group of people agreeing to the facts, to a number of facts before they attempt to decide what explains those facts, isn't even necessarily limited to history, right? Like, that's a scientific endeavor, and that's a political endeavor, and that's, like, a lot of times people will agree on a set of facts before they.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's not uncommon methodologically.
I think that's just how we do any kind of inquiry at all, right? I mean, we have data we want to explain, and then we come up with the hypotheses to try to explain it, and that's how we do things.
Right. And social policy, there's lots of things that are handled that way. So yeah.
Robert says, I was thinking about selling salvation insurance. If for any reason your insurance doesn't work, double your money back.
Hey,
sounds like a pyramid scheme.
I mean, you can buy alien abduction insurance. So why not? I guess if someone's willing to pay for it.
Oh, Nitty's in the house saying, here's a Holy Spirit bomb for Than. I'm just saying.
Nice. I love it.
I didn't even notice that. Oh, snap. All right. I'm trying to get to the next one. StreamYard, they could do better by setting up a second category for just super chats.
They should. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. No, we're caught up. I think that's it. Okay. Thank you for everybody stopping that. Now, I know I want to wrap the ribbon here by letting Paul. I invited him on. He got to hang out with me and deal with my super chats. Paul, what should we discuss before you go? Like, is there anything you want to address or ask or something?
So, one elephant in the room for me, I guess, is so I would encourage everyone in the audience to go watch Eric's most recent video on his channel that has my name in the title. I would love for you to go watch that and for you to evaluate whether or not I have misrepresented anyone, and if so, you can let me know. And honestly, I just want people to hear both sides of everything. So don't take any video that I made for face value. I always put the links to my sources in the description. So go watch the original thing to make sure that I'm doing that. Anyway, I just want to throw out there that I think everyone should go watch that and evaluate for yourselves.
We can hear you. And maybe when you get an angry face, we don't have to see you.
So Eric, I don't know if you want to press on that any further, but
no, I think Paul, I think it's fine. I know. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what I'd want to say as I got the thinking face stroking my beard here, but yeah, people can go and evaluate, make their own decision. And so
what was the well, look, I'm not even kidding. I didn't even watch the original full debate. I was in the chat at a dental office when that debate was happening, joking around like the Bible tells me so, and I didn't even listen. So what was the issue? I don't even know what the issue is.
I'll try and describe it, and then Paul is free to clarify anything. But basically, he had said that Jonathan McClatchy said that in the course of the debate, he talked about what he wasn't so concerned about what historians should do or what they do, but what they should do. And what he was talking about was he doesn't think that they should look at the Gospels as like a pericope by pericope kind of thing. And so it's not like you should just kind of like use the criteria, criteria of like dissimilarity, embarrassment, multiple attestation, and all that stuff, and just go story by story by story and go, okay, this one probably is something that is accurate. And this one, we don't really know about. We just got to kind of feign amnesia every time that we come up to a different story in the Gospels. And what it seemed like Paul understood him as was he's saying that if a document isn't like 100% true or 100% false, like if it's 100%, this is where you can jump in, Paul, because now I'm not even probably saying it right. But what you seem to take him as Paul saying is like, okay, well, either a document has to be 100% accurate or 100% inaccurate, and you just chuck it out. And there's not like this middle ground. And I saw that as like, wow, like that's not really what he was trying to say. And what you in your conversation with Dillahunty was a little bit different. And I felt like it was just like a huge straw man, because clearly like he's not an idiot. Like I don't think anybody would really say that. But I appreciate that you're saying, hey, watch my video, watch Eric's video, let Jonathan speak for himself, defend himself, and come to your own conclusion. So, I think that's good. And that's a start. I just thought like, wow, this obviously is a misrepresentation. I feel like we should try to really steelman each other when we're critiquing each other. But I know as a creator that doesn't always happen at the same time either. And I can at least empathize like somewhat there. I just thought that one was like kind of a big gaffer though. It was just like, whoa, like, I don't know.
So you probably are not surprised to know I completely stand by. I've watched your video. I've watched the debate several times. I completely stand by my assessment to this day. I can explain why if you want. I have consulted dozens of people to see whether or not I was actually misrepresenting Jonathan in any way, Christian and non-Christian. I've yet to have anyone tell me that I mischaracterized him other than yourself and Jonathan. So I'm still kind of waiting.
Well, I mean, a lot of the people, and it's not, I don't think it's like, and I'm not trying to start like a big argument or anything, because I don't know, maybe I'm too nice and I just like getting along with people, and I like you guys. To me, a lot of people that I talked to were just shocked, like, what? Like, that's obviously not what he's saying. That's clearly not what he's saying.
Well, real quick,
he himself,
Eric,
is
real
saying
quick.
not
I
what
want
I'm
to ask something because we got your side and explaining Jonathan a little in there, and we're getting deeper into this, but might as well. Paul, what were you trying to say?
All right.
And get us into it. I want to hear what's happening.
Jonathan, in his opening, said that there are 3 ways to interpret testimony. You can interpret testimony as it is true, that it is a lie, or that they are mistaken. And he said, put on the table, sometimes there's a 4th category of that it's a combination of those things.
Sure.
But during the debate, and I pressed him on this several times and allowed him to change it. He said, I take off of the table the idea that it can be a combination when it comes to the Gospels. That as far as Jonathan is concerned, and I asked him to repeat this, he takes off the table that it can be a combination. When you take off the table that it can be a combination, then you are saying it is 100% one of those things.
Yeah, well, first of all, he doesn't, and forgive me for interrupting, and feel free to,
okay,
he's not an inerrantist. He actually will point to specific places in the Gospels where he does believe that there are contradictions. What he's saying is that when you look at the document as a whole, it doesn't seem to be written by somebody who is trying to give you all of these details and facts about what happened, but then suddenly felt liberties to kind of be sneaky and devious and like insert fictions and stories and different things like that. So what he's making an argument is that this isn't the kind of authors that the gospel writers are.
He's arguing then that if he's saying he's not an inerrantist, then he actually is putting number 4 on the table, that there is a combination of things.
Sure.
And if you watch that debate again,
sure,
because I asked him several times if he takes any possibility. So he took inerrancy off, like he didn't allow for an inerrantist position when he takes off the table that it can be a combination, because an inerrantist means that there is a combination.
Well, yeah, the thing where I push back with that, Paula, is I almost called you Apologia. Apologia. And so where I push back on that is you don't need an infallible source to know that what they're giving you is reliable information.
But reliable information always can contain portions that are mistaken.
Well, I think that he's saying that mistaken is taken off the table because of the kind of experiences that they had and how close up they were, that they weren't the kind of
then he's taking things off the table and saying it's 100% one thing.
Yeah,
like
I think
this. I'm doing a
reducto
reducto here. This is if you were taking his thing, if he takes that off the table, if you're not considering that it can be, I asked him, do you consider this document homogeneous in a way that historians don't? And he affirmed that he does. He affirms it as a homogeneous thing. So
he clarifies it in the stream. So like
that's fine. But during the debate and during the thing. So this is why I'm kind of like, I stand by, if you follow the logic presented in the debate, that you're treating it homogeneously.
Yeah. So, but that's, again, you don't need a completely inerrant source to be giving you mostly or even strongly reliable information.
Because I
look super angry. No, I'm just
kidding. I think I see where the miscommunication is. If I can try to help out here, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding Paul. But Paul, it sounds like what you're saying, because I haven't followed this drama, to be honest with you. I'm recovering from surgery and I don't need that in my life. But it sounds like what's happening is the miscommunication is on that like 100% thing, because it sounds like what Jonathan and maybe you, Eric, are hearing is when Paul is saying 100% true, you're thinking possibly that Paul is talking about, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, the gospel stories being 100% true. But what Paul's actually saying is, no, here are the 4 options. The 4th option is it's a combination of like lie. It could be a combination of lie, mistaken, or truth. And by Jonathan eliminating that fourth option, Paul's then saying, okay, so either one of those three options has to be the 100% truth. So it's not about whether or not the Gospels are 100% true or not. It's about whether or not one of those options are 100% true. Am I understanding the situation correctly?
Stan Steelman you there, Paul?
That is correct, and that's just why when I've had so many people listen to it, it's like, Paul, the way you're characterizing this seems to make full sense, and maybe it's on
Jonathan actually believes, though. Like, do you think that's what he actually believes?
Yes, I do. I do think that he wants to tell me that it's in one of those categories, and there's no combination.
Yeah, see, I don't think
him at his word.
I don't think that's what he was communicating. So, I mean, if you want to say like it was in the debate, like a failure for him to communicate that accurately.
I think he is still I do not think I'm mischaracterizing what was said, and I do not think that if there is something other than what I've said, that it has been well articulated yet. And I maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I am one of these believers who, in the scriptures talks about that I just can't understand. That I
don't think we're saying that about you, Paul. What I would say is, sure, but
I still I need this to be better articulated. If I'm wrong about the characterization,
I think again what he was saying is this particular approach that's used by scholars is not a good approach epistemologically, and that we should be looking at the documents as wholes. And if somebody is like way more often reliable than not, then that's what we're taking. So it's more of an objective kind of thing. But if you feel like there was something weird with the way he was phrased, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But I pressed back on that. Like I asked, I allowed for that to be a thing, and Jonathan kept saying that he wanted to treat these things homogeneously when I specifically used that phrase.
Well, yeah, but homogeneously, again, I just would push back, and we're probably just going in circles at this point.
Yeah,
I mean, that's okay.
So this is why I say go listen for yourselves, because I completely stand by my characterization, and as was reasonably Steelman here. I think Jonathan doesn't feel that was right. I'm also very confused as to motivation for asking for apologies.
Yeah,
I'm gonna let you. You'd have to talk to him.
Yeah,
I can't really adjudicate that. Obviously,
isn't that a bit far though? Like you need to go. You stained my record, or so. I don't understand, because it's like maybe it's a misunderstanding, but like putting it all on Paul, he's not owning any responsibility for miscommunication. And I haven't even watched it, but it sounds like there's some miscommunication here in some way. Paul understood him as this. If you were so upset about it, then, I don't know. It's just kind of weird to go out and scream on social media about it.
Here's what I would recommend. Okay. And I'm trying to work. It's like, I feel like I'm in that scene in Our Brother We're Out, though. He's like, I'm voting for yours truly. And, the other guy's like, no, you got to follow me. And he's like, well, I'm with you fellers, but obviously I'm in the middle of this. I'm friends with Jonathan. I think that to me, when I heard it, I was like, wow, how did he get that out of that? But Than standing here, he's saying, this is what I hear you saying. So I'm willing to give some benefit there. But I don't think that's what he meant at all. And I think just out of charity, when you're making a video, and this is something that we all could do, myself included, is just try and clarify the other person's position before you kind of put them on blast. But I don't want to tell you how to run your channel. And so I just think it's
Paul's saying he did clarify it during the debate.
Yeah, I get that. But to me,
so if there is a change after, and Paul's already done this, then instead of, in my opinion, there was a change. Instead of being like, oh, he did me dirty and wrong and things like that, there's a different way I personally would approach. If you misunderstood me in my last dialogue with you and Michael Jones, right? I'd be like, hey, bro, that's not what I meant, or not what I said. And there's sometimes I feel like we're talking past each other, but I'm not going to go out and go, Eric Manning, how dare you? That's a little weird to me.
For me, it's such a ridiculous kind of straw man, because it's not what he believes. But you've explained yourself, Paul.
I still hold by it. So
yeah, so you've explained yourself. I would just say the best thing for people to do, because I don't want to take 20 minutes going back and forth
Right.
on this. Just watch our response. Watch Paul's video. Decide for yourself. I'm not, gonna sit here and rake you over the coals and say that you're a horrible human being. I think I want, if anything, I would like for to come out of this is that we just try and represent each other as best we can. Maybe you felt like you did that. If you feel like I do you dirty, I want you to know me about it, because
I'm making a
I want you to
post
tell
right
me
now.
about it. And Derek, I want you to tell me about it, because if I say something in one of my videos responding to you guys that you're like, well, that ain't right. I want to know about it. I want to get it right. Because
I try when I do a response video, but I also do so much that 90% of the time people who do videos and they are talking about me, or they do, and they're wrong, it doesn't bother me. I seriously, it doesn't even matter to me, to be honest.
Yeah, like I can't imagine asking for an apology if someone did that, right?
Yeah.
Like, that would be.
Is that
or a
permission to
retraction,
just
like-
make a bunch of response videos to you, Derek? Just calling you dumb and
Yes,
stuff?
you may.
I'm just kidding.
You know what they say? Any publicity is good.
Don't listen to this evil satanic atheist. That's going to be
There
the
are
title.
plenty of those out there too.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
Last super chat by Vesper just asked, and I did have the thing up there saying no more super chat questions, but is faith not required to enter heaven? John 3:16. I suspect you guys would say, yeah, faith is
Yes.
required.
Faith is just not an intellectual assent. So,
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you for bringing that up. I didn't even expect you to bring that up, but you did, and I guess
Well, it's up to Eric's whether he wanted to or not. So that
no,
was
it's fine. I hope that people really just see my heart, and that is like, I don't want this to be like Bloods and Crips gang war and this, that, or the other. And I'm put in these situations. I just want us all to like do as best as we can. I appreciate that you're willing to bring it up and speak about it. Now it's, it's stuff that you guys can work out amongst yourselves. Maybe it won't happen. Maybe it will. I don't know. I just hope.
I'm also I want to know if I'm wrong. Like I
Sure.
definitely do. That's why I'm asking people to watch the video. Go watch his video and come back and tell me that I'm wrong. I'd love that.
now he'll only talk to him if Jonathan publicly apologizes. I'm just kidding.
No.
Well, yeah, let's not do
That's
that.
not-
I mean,
I'm
Yeah.
teasing.
it just sounds to me like there's a talking past each other going on, but again, I haven't really watched everything. I'm just going based off what I'm hearing right now.
I did ask him yesterday, like kind of a question in that vein, but I haven't read anything. He sent me some articles or something about this. It's just saying like, how did I phrase it? He's in the chat here, messenger. Here it is. So I asked him, I said, where would you point me for a one-stop shop of the incredibly historically reliability of the Gospels and Acts? When you say historically reliable, putting miracles aside, are you suggesting everything about them is historically accurate? If not everything, what in them isn't historically accurate? And he said, on internal evidence, he gave me this list of stuff I haven't even been able to look at. But what do you do? So
I say we just flame each other to death and just, maybe shanks at
I
dawn.
say we also just should be instead of going through the data and reasoning through it, we should just try to reenact that debate scene from God's Not Dead.
That's right.
Well, let me plug you guys here for coming and hanging out with me today. Apologia, I really appreciate you and what you do, and the way you carry yourself too. There's plenty of new atheists out there that kind of come out strong and heavy and dismiss out of hand sometimes things rather than trying to get in the sandbox. And you're pretty good at jumping in the sandbox and trying to have that conversation. Tell us a little bit about your channels. Well,
I would say is, my main channel, a lot of people know about, but I'd love to grow Apologia Live, where I do more live things like this. Eric's been on my channel before. So if we're going to check out a new thing, Apologia Live, I'd love for you to subscribe there so I can slowly climb up and make that a thing too.
And that's so these are both part of your business and what you do. So they're helping you out by subscribing and hanging out. You do take questions and talk.
I do. Yes, I would. Yes, absolutely. Appreciate. Yeah. And yeah, Patreon, all those kind of things. If you like what I do, I appreciate that. But hanging out with me is the best thing.
Absolutely. Awesome. Now we're on to Testify. We're talking to Eric here. Eric, tell us about your channel. I'm posting it in the chat, letting everybody know where they can subscribe.
Sure. I mean, it's just videos responding to just defending the claims of the historicity of the Gospels, Acts, argument for miracles. I do response videos to people here and there.
If you want to know why I'm wrong, you should go to Testify.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm basically just Paul and Derek here just keeping me in business, and so
right.
But yeah, so there's a Paul response video there.
What he's missing?
Yeah, he asked what he was missing, so I tried to explain casualness. Yep. So there's casualness.
There's a jab at MythVision right here, Paula. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Go check out the jabs by Eric. I put it in the chat. And then we got Exploring Reality. What's going on with this channel here, Than?
What's up? Yeah, so that's my channel. I'm more of a generalist than anything else. If I specialize in anything, it's more philosophy. It's a smaller channel, and it's more of an extension just of like a ministry that I operate called Exploring Reality. And really the main mission for my channel and the ministry that I operate is just to try to combat Christian intellectualism, and trying to be a bridge pretty much between the scholarship and the church, and trying to change church culture to kind of do these things. So awesome. Yeah, I also have a Patreon. So if you guys want to support what I do, please, that helps a lot because everything is donation based. I don't charge for anything that I do. So like I have 3 speaking events next month, and I have a debate coming up, and I don't take payment for anything. Just because awesome. I have a really strong conviction for that.
Well, we got MVP courses, and you can stay tuned. I know that Paul will have some courses he's going to launch, and he's going to be doing Kip Davis is coming up, and that's our next course we're launching right now. We've got the Dennis McDonald Reading the Gospels with One Eye on Greek Poetry. We've got several other scholar courses, and then I'm working on 2 right now with Robin Faith Walsh. One is on Paul, the other is on the Gospels. But yeah, check out our description. I really appreciate you guys. Seriously, appreciate you hanging out with me today.
Thanks for having me.
It was fun. Thanks.
Yeah, it's an honor.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, if you forget who you are, never forget. We are MythVision.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.